Based on the plot of the game, in 10 years, the Federation Kingdom of the East was going to get wrecked. And guess who was going to do it? The 5 Great Sins. These weren't regular people. First, there was a woman with crazy white hair and red lightning energy, a spooky shadow person, a mysterious lady with a glowing green book, a girl with cat ears, and this intense guy waving a staff made of blue power. All of them looked like trouble. Then the planet just kind of exploded underneath them, leaving nothing but a dead wasteland. Yeah, that was the plot of the game. And inside a super fancy mansion, there was our MC. He was sitting at a giant desk with like a mountain of papers. The protagonist was thinking that to stop this whole crazy world-ending thing, he had actually become the patron for those 5 great sins. But he also thought that he did not sign up for this much drama. He was in over his head, for sure. But that's the future. The start of the story was here. Inside this amazing mansion, our protagonist, whom everyone in this world called him Alan, just sat on a big soft sofa, pretending he was reading a book. Alan started thinking about his old life. He said he used to be a normal dude working 78-hour weeks, which, by the way, is nuts. Then, suddenly, he just popped into the body of a noble in a fantasy land. Was that good? Well, kind of. He was shocked to be isekai'd like a cliché fantasy manhwa. But looking at the book in his hand, Alan had no idea what the book displayed, so he just looked confused. The butler told him that he was holding the book upside down, and Alan realized he couldn't even read their language. He was illiterate. Plus, he didn't get any cool superpowers like any other protagonist. That sucked. But fuck yeah. Later, in the massive dining hall, he got presented with the fanciest meal ever. The butler called him Young Master and told him everything was ready. Alan was so happy he just stuffed his face, cheeks all puffy. To be this rich? Yeah, this was so good. Bye-bye useless works in his previous life. Then, the maid waited to see if he was finished and offered to help with his bath before bed. So, Alan went into this giant golden bathtub where 2 maids washed him. At first, Alan looked freaked out by all the attention. But then he just relaxed, thinking that being spoiled like this was actually pretty awesome. He said he didn't even know where he was now. But he doesn't care. At least he has all the money to live like a king of Dubai in this life. Suddenly, the maid mentioned that the other young masters, Leo and Tonio, would return tomorrow, and told him to sleep early. But Alan had no idea who these guys were. When the maid asked him why he acted like he didn't know his family, Alan got super nervous. After a simple explanation of the family, the name Palacio started echoing in his head. Suddenly, he got chills all over. What the fuck? That name sounded scary for some reason. That's when Alan freaked out, sliding underwater in his tub. He had a total meltdown. He suddenly remembered he was in Psychedelia, a hardcore game he used to play on his handheld. In the game, no matter what, when the 5 great sins showed up, wrath, greed, sloth, pride, obsession, everything went downhill. This world is set to be doomed. Bad stuff happened to everyone. And the Palacio family, the family he was now a part of, well, they were always the first to get destroyed. In the game, the Palacios were all just one big problem. Leo, the oldest brother, was the king of prostitutes. Tonio, the next one, was the king of drugs. Alan was so done he could not believe this mess. This is a noble family of troublemakers that is a part of the subquest before the main episode begins. He was reborn as the extra villain, Palacio House's 3rd son, Alan Palacio. Yikes. That night, Alan was lying in bed, crying. He wished he could go back to his regular job, even if he had to work every hour of the week. He thought that, sure, the food and baths were sweet, but in 10 years, he'd just end up dead anyway. He decided this was worse than not getting paid for months. And the other guys, who fell into fantasy worlds, they always got magic or some crazy cheat power. But Alan? Just a normal dude, total ripoff. Fuck the author or whatever god that brings him here. But then, Alan got an idea. He realized that knowing the future was kind of like having a power. He could be like a prophet, maybe. He decided, hey, why not try to stop the causes of the world's destruction? Maybe if he fixed the 5 great sins early, everything would turn out fine. He thought he just needed to reform those kids before they turned into monsters. Should be easy, right? Haha, not really, especially since he still had 0 powers. 2 months later, Alan was back at his desk, doing grown-up stuff. A tough-looking guy with an eye patch showed up. His name was Evan. Alan explained that they had rescued the orphans from a place that was not really an orphanage, but actually a messed-up human testing lab. They make a new orphanage, and left it in the hands of a girl called Utia. Alan said Evan had serious skills, And Evan was a bit confused because Alan's face, let's admit, was tough to read. Alan tried to smile, but it was painfully awkward. He got zero expression. Alan himself feel like he possesses this body, stopped at the face. Evan explained that Utia, the girl from the orphanage, was strangely powerful, like seriously strong for a kid. Alan decided to just let her stay at the orphanage, even though it looked like he didn't care. But that was part of his plan. In the game, Utia would sign a deal with some scary creature and turn into Wrath, one of the 5 great sins, who would go on to destroy everything. But, he figured, if she just grew up happy, then maybe she'd never become Wrath. That seemed like a good plan for now. He then made up a reason to leave Utia where she was, and told Evan to make sure nobody talked about it and to give Utia plenty of money. He also handed over a letter for Utia. Evan asked if it was important, and Alan said it was just to check on her, but actually, he filled the letter with special game quotes he remembered from the story about the sin of Wrath. In the game, whenever someone tried to calm down Wrath using the spell words, it always failed. Wrath would go wild anyway because she said it was too late, but Alan hoped this time would be different. Finally, at the orphanage, Evan handed Utia the letter. She felt super sad, like why didn't Alan want her close by? Suddenly, she released this insane blast of red and black magic, and Evan started sweating bullets. This was insane for him. Manifesting mana in this form is only possible in the Master Realm. Who the fuck is this crazy-ass girl? But then, when Evan repeated that Alan said it just wasn't time yet, her power faded. Utia read the letter, saw the weird quote, and felt a sense of peace. The quote was, "Keep this in Companion of Darkness, Tomb of Light, 1 core, and 1 belonging." Pink energy surrounded her, and she started to smile, thinking this was a special promise just for her. She said she got what he meant, and she would do her best. Alan was the one who saved her from hell, and she will gladly follow his master words. Yeah, she was the first villain who would destroy this world. Sin of Wrath, Daughter of Monsters, Bloody Queen Utia. Sounds pretty metal. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Alan was sleeping like a baby. Even in his dreams, he felt like he bought himself more time to enjoy his cushy new life. The moon outside shined bright, almost like it was cheering him on. Alan decided he'd keep working hard on saving the next kid. Bro, this seems like one of my best anime called Overlord. Both of the anime and this manhwa have same kind of misunderstanding. I love it, and this was just the beginning. The next day, Alan was in a massive library. He was crawling around, seriously desperate, digging through books. He was just mumbling to himself, totally stressed out. He was looking for any clue about the third villain boss. But honestly, his brain felt like it was about to explode. Right then, Evan walked in and brought news. He told Alan that they managed to rescue the second child Alan talked about. Alan jumped up, super eager, and asked if they treated the child really nicely because that part was mega important. Evan said yes, and he explained how they saved the kid from an illegal slave market. Suddenly, Tonio Palacio showed up, kicking the door, looking like he just owned the place. Tonio made fun of Alan for trying to read, even though everyone knew Alan totally sucked at reading. He grabbed Alan in a headlock just to be a jerk. Alan wasn't about to fight, though he wasn't stupid. His brothers were scary. He quickly bowed down and asked for forgiveness. Bro, our MC doesn't have any pride. Tonio then stepped on Alan's head and kept mocking him. Suddenly, a dagger pierced the wall around them. Things got even more tense. Leo Palacio, the oldest brother, stormed in. He shouted at Tonio and said he didn't want any bloody messes in the library, and also said he stunk of drugs. Those two brothers just stood there, ready to throw hands and see who was the bigger boss. Alan crawled out from the library, thinking these guys were way creepier than he remembered from the game. He realized his scummy brothers weren't just losers, they were actually dangerous. Big deal villains fighting to become the family head. There was Leo, the king of prostitution, and Tonio, the king of drugs. Alan knew he had to stay far away from both if he wanted to keep his chill and comfy life. He just straight up ran away, while the fight inside kept booming. With new determination in his eyes, he decided he was totally fine living as the weak, dumb, useless child of the family. Later, he was just flopped on a fancy couch, being super dramatic about his life. Evan watched him, kind of confused. Evan thought Alan was a weird guy, because he somehow kept finding out about secret, illegal stuff, even beyond their own region. Yet the guys kept the low-profile mode and didn't even have a single drop of pride. Evan just didn't get it. He could not understand Alan at all. Evan finally asked why Alan sent the rescued child to the orphanage, but Alan just sighed. The child Evan rescued wasn't any regular kid. He was actually Deus Macalian, the second boss from the game. Dude, Deus was the future sin of sloth. In the game, after being passed around and abused like trash, Deus used to destroy entire kingdoms in the most horrible ways. Gamers always freaked out at how scary this part got. Like a real gore game. Despite his name Sloth, in reality Deus worked harder than anyone and always paid people back, good or bad. That was why Alan basically told Evan to treat Deus extra gently. No way was he trying to make that guy mad. He told Evan that he sent Deus to the orphanage because it wasn't time yet. Evan wasn't surprised by that. He knew his master was going to say that classic line again. He also asked if the letter Alan sent to Utia was about Deus too. Alan said yes, and explained he told Utia to take care of this slightly sick child he was sending. That night, at the orphanage, Utia found Deus by himself. She seemed strangely nice and a bit creepy at the same time. She looked at Deus and called him broken, said she could tell what happened to him. She also said that the Great Moon, a.k.a. Alan, had chosen him now and congratulated him in her weird way. Utia told Deus that if he followed orders, he could use his new powers and get his revenge. Pink and purple energy started to swirl all around them as their power grew. She then looked at Alan's letter. She thought it was time to send her first reply with a little greeting to her master. Bro, the misunderstanding just keep getting bigger. Back at the mansion, Evan burst into Alan's office looking totally panicked. He was shouting that there was big trouble, and Alan was only interested in finding the third villain boss again. Classic. He doesn't remember where the fuck that child is supposed to be. Evan tried to explain that the scum wait. The second young master was in trouble. Alan was shocked to his core when he heard Tonio was dead. He could not believe why it happened so fast. Suddenly, they were at a funeral. Tonio was lying in an open casket with blue flowers, literally died. Their dad just slumped in a chair with two ladies, acting super bored. They didn't care at all. One girl even said she just wanted food, and the other said it was boring. Alan watched his family and thought they were messed up, but this was too much even for him. Tonio had died from an accidental fall. That was not how things happened in the game. He remembered how Leo screamed in the game, trembling because he accidentally killed his brother. But now, Leo had the world's biggest smiley face. He was not even bothered to hide his feelings, as he said how lucky he is. Alan was sure Leo or his friends were the real reason Tonio fell. Still, he doesn't care, and tells himself to just focus on dealing with the 5 great sins and not get murdered by them. 1 year later, the situation changed. Leo solved the problem of who would lead next as the heir of the family and took over all of Tonio's drug business. The whole county was much more peaceful now, weirdly enough. Time passed. Now, Alan and Evan were just sipping tea and relaxing in Alan's private room. Alan explained that he and Utia had become pen pals. If he kept those letters going, it could help him a lot later. He read Utia's latest letter. She wrote that Yuna was great at hide-and-seek, Aiden loved playing war games, and Deus was growing up well and liked to do puppeteering. Alan said these kids seemed pretty normal if you didn't know their backstories. Evan noticed there were more and more names in the letters. He was surprised at how that little orphanage kept getting more kids and more sponsorships. Alan agreed, but figured as long as everyone was safe and happy, it wasn't bad. Evan had another bit of news. While Alan was desperately searching for clues about the third villain boss, the Information Guild found something. Alan was so glad he hoped it was finally the ancient book about that boss. Things were looking up, at least for now. But not everywhere was peaceful. That night, far from the mansion, 2 men from Leo's group were walking through a snowy courtyard at a drug site called Margot. They talked about how generous the eldest Palacio brother was, handing out huge rewards and building a giant organization. But, out of nowhere, one of the men suddenly froze. He looked freaked out. His own hand started moving on its own. He pulled a sword without meaning to and attacked the other man. After that, he even stabbed himself. Standing in the darkness, Deus was controlling them both, moving his fingers with purple energy threads like they were his puppets. He said he liked today's puppet show. Utia was there too, on a rooftop, watching everything. Deus asked if there was any point in killing these guys, since he didn't know if it had anything to do with getting his own revenge. Utia told him it was totally helpful. They needed to clean up the place so Alan could return. They couldn't let the place look trashy for their master, right? In the end, Deus agreed. They released a bunch of crazy energy and wiped out the whole drug site. Utia finished it up by saying everything would go as Alan willed it. She said their group, the Blue Moon, would be Alan's sword. They then leave after carved a moon symbol into the street like that aliens do when they steal our crops. Man, things were just getting more and more insane. Alan tried to play it safe, but crazy stuff kept on happening anyway. Dude really couldn't catch a break. Now, It's been 2 years since Alan and Utia started writing letters to each other. Time just flew by. One day, Evan was wandering around the giant mansion looking for Alan, calling out his name. He finally found Alan hanging out in the backyard, practicing magic or something, just waving his hands and looking all concentrated. Evan shared the good news. The last kid that Alan needed to find is now staying in the orphanage. Alan couldn't believe it. All 5 deadly sins had been found and safely brought to the orphanage. He thought about how, in just 2 years, he had actually managed to save all the remaining deadly sins from their sad fate. That was insane. He got so happy he started feeding cake to Evan, and even started tossing macarons and making Evan do tricks for him, just like he was a dog or something. That's funny as hell. Alan said he had some trouble finding greed, the 3rd sin, but he managed it by getting Evan to do detective work using his gamer knowledge. He was totally hyped, and told Evan that now he could finally rest. Evan asked if all this business was just for taking care of the orphanage. Alan said yep, that was it. Evan said that was a relief, but also asked if Alan was really happy, since Alan didn't look it. Alan said he was smiling right then, and pointed to his mouth, but there was only a tiny little crease. Evan saw that and thought, well, if Alan called that a smile, he wouldn't argue. Later on, Alan lay down on the ground and stretched out. He started thinking out loud that things had gone way better than he ever expected. The deadly sins, those bosses in the game, only became monsters because their pasts were so messed up. Saving them before that happened was super hard, and Alan always worried he'd be too late, that he'd rescue them after they were already ruined. But now he felt a lot more relaxed about it. He wanted to know how things were going at the orphanage. Evan said things were running smoothly, as usual, and gave Alan a new letter. Evan remembered how the kids used to seem like broken dolls, but now they looked much happier and full of energy. Alan said maybe they wouldn't need to hire an extra caretaker after all. He was surprised by how good Utia was at this job. He guessed that, because of her own rough past, she was extra attached to the orphanage. After all of this and how they kept sending letters, Alan started to think Utia was actually a pretty nice girl in some ways. Yeah, bro, not a chance. Evan wanted to know if the letter said anything important. But our boy said, not really, it just said everyone was okay. Some kids were growing faster than others, but there was no need to worry about Deus at all, and everyone else was doing just fine. It sounded like all the kids were having a blast. Alan felt so relieved. He said that this showed the environment was super important. If you grow up somewhere good, even kids with crazy powers could turn out okay. Evan wondered if Alan ever planned to meet them, since Alan was always making excuses about the right time. Well, Alan admitted he didn't actually want to meet them. He knew, in the game, those sins had really scary personalities as adults. And even though Alan saved them early, he still felt nervous. To make an excuse, he said maybe it would be okay in 5 years. Evan said he understood. Until then, Alan just wanted to keep practicing magic, so he had a way to protect himself. Anyway, Alan found out he could do magic, thank God, and his body was actually great for it. So, he wanted to get stronger just in case those kids went wild one day. Evan then asked Alan if he heard about an organization called Blue Moon. Alan said, no, never heard of those guys. Evan explained that the Blue Moon Group had recently become famous for hunting down all kinds of criminal rings, like they were busting all sorts of shady businesses. Alan just shrugged and said if these people were cleaning up crooks, that was great, and he wasn't worried they'd probably disappear eventually since he never heard them from the game. But Evan added that Blue Moon even killed nobles sometimes, and he was surprised Alan hadn't heard of them. When Alan realized that, he got freaked out. He told Evan to sleep next to his room from now on, just in case. That night, over at the orphanage, Utia got everyone together and said it was time for the Blue Moon Group's weekly report. One girl came up, said she had chopped off all the heads of the slave traders. She was the sin of pride, and her name was Seolrang. She said the slave traders couldn't even figure out who she was, even though her clothes were super flashy. She said she would have spared them if they could have guessed her eye color, but none of them could. Then the sin of greed, her name was Rina, reported that all the corpses from her mission got melted. Bro, these kids were going places. Another boy, the sin of obsession named Raiden, said he finished things in the south, took care of some illegal human testing labs, and turned the bad guys into human soup. Then Utia, acting like a boss, said everything would go according to Alan's will and that they all existed for the sake of the Great Moon. Yeah, so the Blue Moon Group was actually all the saved deadly sins banding together. Alan had no clue yet, and man, he was going to be so shocked when he found out they were running around as his personal mafia. But Deus said they had a problem. Utia asked how that could be, since everything was perfect under Alan's will. Damn, she really worshipped Alan at this point. Deus explained he found something bad, a written order that looked like it was targeting Alan. Even worse, the head of Avalon, the troublemaking group, was actually the eldest son of Alan's own family. The order said they were going to slowly poison Alan and kill him after their father died. Utia got so angry, her aura started scaring all of the other kids. She said there was absolutely no way she would let Alan get hurt. Fast forward another 2 years. Alan's father, the Count, finally kicked the bucket, that is, he died, and everyone said it was heart failure. But really, it looked like he just overdosed. Nobody cried, not a single soul. Leo asked around about another big attack from the Blue Moon Gang, and someone told him that the group had wiped out even more men last night. Hearing that, Alan now realized everyone was more careful and scared of Blue Moon. Now this Blue Moon thing started to make him worry, and so the Count's death, without a single person mourning, ended in complete silence. But things weren't so chill. Leo was watching Alan with some really scary, murderous eyes. Like, he was basically shooting daggers at him for real. In Alan's room, Evan asked him what he was going to do next, since Leo was basically on track to become the family head. But Evan was confused because Alan was packing his bags now. Alan then told Evan to pack up because they were going to run for it. Evan was shocked and wondered if Alan was really planning to leave everything behind. Alan said, "Not exactly just going south for a bit, to a small town called Rodmill." This was all part of Alan's secret plan. As they left, Leo watched from the mansion, looking super frustrated and suspicious. "Bro, our boy is so stupid-minded, and I love him." For 3 glorious days, Alan lived his dream life. He made himself breakfast, Evan brought him juice, and Alan couldn't believe he finally got peace. But just as Alan was settling in, he got a letter and had to go back to the family mansion because Leo was dead, bro. Like, out of nowhere. Dead! Alan could not get his head around it. Leo had been stabbed right in the heart. Now Alan had to deal with all the family drama again. He wanted to know what happened to Leo, so he started asking around. But here's the funny part. All of Leo's men freaked out whenever Alan looked at them. Even the maids didn't want to get close. Alan thought this was nuts. He asked Evan if he figured anything out. Evan replied by asking if Alan was the one who made Avalon and Leon, as the boss, disappear overnight. Alan was just like, dude, what a freaking way. He had no idea what was happening. Flashback time. When Alan and Evan left for Rodmill, Evan wondered if moving to a big city would be safer. Alan said, no way Rodmill was his final stop. He felt like his job was done when he had saved the 5 great sins and stopped all the world-ending drama. Rodmill, with their family villa, had nothing to do with the original game story. He just wanted to relax and live like a real noble for once. Alan got serious and blurted out that everything has a reason, yet Evan pretty much called him out, saying Alan only acted like this when he was completely unbothered. Meanwhile, Leo watched Alan leave. He was considering if he should just kill Alan or not. After all, he had planned to poison Alan after their dad died, but now he didn't really care. Plus, things with Avalon, his secret crime group, were going badly, so it didn't matter anymore to take care of his stupid little brother. But he still told one of his most trusted guys, Al, to follow Alan's carriage. Hearing that, Al asked if his boss meant he should kill Alan. Leo was totally weirded out when Al actually questioned the order he had never talked back before. But right then, Al stabbed him right in the chest. Turns out, Al had a secret. His real name was Hedon, and he was with Blue Moon the whole time. He told Leo that Blue Moon followed the teachings of the Red Moon, and anyone who threatened the Great Moon would be eliminated. Hedon was doing everything for the sake of Alan's safety. Then he kept slicing through Leo while explaining it. Hedon said he could make his own decisions, and had just been waiting for Leo to admit that he was after Alan. He told his former boss that because his words to tail Alan before, Avalon would be wiped from the map, and it was too bad since Alan, their Great Moon, already gave him a chance. But what he does is plan to kill their savior. Bro, poor Leo. He died because of misunderstanding. Back at Alan's little villa, he woke up feeling like life was just perfect, another chill, lazy day. He could sleep in, eat tasty food whenever he wanted. Not a single problem in sight. Evan came in with a letter. Alan almost choked on his food when he read it. The letter said Leo was dead, and the family was asking Alan to come back for the funeral. Just like that, the free trial for Alan's heaven mode was over, and now, everyone kept avoiding him. Even Leo's men and the maids acted like he was a ghost. Evan, with his serious face, asked if Alan was running things in secret. Alan sat in the corner, looking totally depressed, asking himself why everyone thought he was the villain now. Evan explained it perfectly. Alan was the only person who stood to gain after Leo died, and Avalon was destroyed. So, everyone thought he was the genius in the shadows who made the whole thing happen. After all, Alan had the perfect reason and the perfect timing to become the head of the family. Plus, after they left, Leo was murdered, and all obstacles just vanished. It looked like Alan engineered everything. Alan was just like, "Dude, is this fun for you?" He didn't know where to start. Nobody in their world could kill someone as powerful as Leo so easily. There was one organization people whispered about. Blue Moon, the group that hunted down other criminals. Evan said the Info Guild claimed it wasn't them, though Blue Moon always left a special mark in the ground, not just dead bodies. But the men from Avalon were stabbed with swords, and it looked like someone opened the road to hell for them. Alan understood why everyone at the mansion was scared stiff of him now, but in his mind, it didn't add up. Blue Moon never showed up in the original game, and all these supposed weaklings should have disappeared before the story even began. So, who the heck could actually do something like this? Alan was just left there, surrounded by people who thought he was some evil mastermind and no idea what was really going on. While Alan was stuck in all his new troubles over at the orphanage, Yudia was running her own operation. She checked in with her crew, the other ex-Deadly Sins, now working as the Blue Moon Squad. She asked if anyone left any traces during their latest cleanup. Rinny said nope, and Solrang said it was the same for her, just a bunch of bodies left behind. Deus came back too, saying that all that was left were piles of Avalon soldiers' bodies. Radin added that he cut all the targets in half, just like she wanted. Utia was hyped, saying that now everything was perfect. Avalon, which used to rule the whole kingdom's underworld, got wrecked in 5 days flat. Radon, though, said he wasn't sure it was totally clean. Utia asked what he meant, and Radon handed her a document he'd found with the nobles linked to Avalon. He told her the Altia dukedom seemed deeply connected too. Utia read the paper and said that everyone probably knew what she was about to say. The squad started getting prepped for more action. Raiden promised to take care of it quietly. Utia then calmed down and asked if the Information Guild was still secure in their palm. Rinna said yes, and they were taking care of this business separately from Blue Moon itself. Deus said all the guilds acted the same. They called their Blue Moon action was the work of a hell sword made by a swordmaster. They agreed Rinna would keep tabs on any movements, and Udia told everyone again, super seriously, that the most important thing was everything they did had to stay secret from that person. She had said it 1,000,000 times, so everyone knew. Deus didn't fully get it, he wondered, why someone as strong as Udia would be so scared just about Alan finding out. But she said they were swords now. They didn't get to have their own thoughts. They just needed to obey. Alan was the moon. If they disappointed him, it was game over. To be honest, Deus found it weird that Utia, with all her crazy power, could still act so anxious, but he decided to just follow her orders. All for the great moon, right? Back to Alan. He was so over this count life. After Leo's funeral, Alan had been stuck with a non-stop mountain of work for a whole month. The job was endless. He just wanted to eat snacks and loaf around like a real noble. And get this, Leo's death was supposed to be like 6 years away, according to the original timeline. But now that everything changed, Alan got all the family chores dumped on him at once. Also, he noticed something weird. Whenever he called for people, they didn't just come, but they did show up in droves to drop off extra paperwork. He figured everyone was working hard because they thought Alan was the super scary mastermind behind all the family deaths. He just wanted to quit, bro. Alan wished everyone would be more independent so he could go back to his easy life. At night, Evan was shocked that Alan had managed to reach second-tier magic after only 2 years of practicing on his own. That was crazy talented, since most people needed 4 years and a bunch of teachers. Magic took natural skill too. Alan wasn't surprised, he said. He had a bit of talent and had worked hard, but honestly, he was just desperate to survive. He wanted to be able to defend himself. But here's the problem. Alan's mana hall, the thing that held his magic power, was freakishly tiny. No matter how much he trained, he would never be able to level up like a real wizard. So he felt like all this effort might be useless. Evan suddenly brought up the real exciting news. An invitation to the ball was finally here. Alan was confused, but then ended up dressed up and on his way to the event with Evan. He was already tired just thinking about it. This was a big nobles' ball in the southern Osteria kingdom, where aristocrats from all over got together. Alan knew he was about to be made a count, so he thought maybe this was a good place to network and score some peace for his future, if only he could make some decent connections. You'd think, right? But every time Alan tried talking to the fancy nobles, they just turned and ran for their lives. Evan told Alan not to let it get him down, but Alan just shrugged and played it cool. He figured everyone avoided him because he was low class, a troublemaker compared to his legendary great-grandfather. The family's current rep was a total disaster. so Alan thought he was just unpopular. Too bad he was missing the real reason. Everyone thought he was some sort of criminal boss because of all the dark rumors swirling around the house. Alan didn't give up, though. He told himself he'd unlock his social skill and practiced his friendly smile. He grabbed a glass of wine, praised how special it tasted, said the aroma was one of a kind, and even said he'd love to buy some bottles for home. But his smile must have looked totally evil, like next-level creepy, because the woman who owned the wine started sweating bullets and took off to tell her dad to give Alan some more. Alan thought she was just shy, but in reality, everyone was whispering that he'd blackmailed her out of rare wine. Evan couldn't help but laugh. Alan put his charm on repeat, trying his act over and over, and all it did was get him a bunch of free stuff. He just didn't understand. The family was way more infamous than he realized, and after the rumor that Alan got rid of his monster brothers, nobody wanted to get on his bad side. Totally defeated, he went outside to get some fresh air, thinking this night was rough. When he was walking out, we could see a red girl looking at him with a serious face. But then, plot twist. While Alan was out in the cool night air, he noticed that, actually, one woman was watching him. She wasn't scared at all. Instead, she looked curious, like she actually wanted to talk. Is this the time for our boy's love to bloom? Of course not. The lady introduced herself as Loria, the third daughter of the Duke Altia. Now, Alan knew her family. Altia was one of the 3 biggest shadow families in the kingdom, known as the Northern Troublemakers. There was, like, 0 chance this girl was normal. Loria came closer, and Alan thought about it if she was Altia's daughter, but he didn't remember her from the game at all. That probably meant she was already dead by the time the game started. She explained her situation straight up. She needed Alan's help because she was about to get assassinated by her own sisters. The Duke's condition was getting worse, so it was a major fight for inheritance. Alan realized this must be why she got erased from the game's story so easily, but our boy wasn't about to get involved with real trouble. His motto is to keep alive as a wealthy dude. So he turned her down, saying he could barely handle his own life. Loria tried to offer half her family's fortune as a bribe, since she knew Alan was strong enough to destroy Avalon in a single night. But our weak dude said, nope. He felt a little bad when he walked away, especially when he saw how sad she looked. He told her he wished her luck and hoped she found someone reliable to help her out. You could tell he was kind of sorry, but he had enough problems to deal with already. Watching from the shadows, the Blue Moon kids were discussing Alan again. They saw the Altia family approaching Alan, and someone said to tell Utia about it. But Rinna, the sin of greed, said it was fine. Loria was the only Altia who wasn't tangled up with Avalon, and Radon wasn't after her. Deus said that made things simple. The rest of the Altia family would be dealt with soon. Ren said that the team should just follow the Red Moon's orders and do their job, keeping information about Avalon away from Alan. Bro, I bet after all this Altia dukedom bad people got killed, Lauren will think Alan is the one helping her and start to simp him later. But I don't know. Let's see if my guess is correct. Back to the story. Alan, meanwhile, kept walking and wondered if he had some kind of people-repelling barrier on him. But then, the curiosity magnet worked once again. The other woman who had been staring at him at the ball finally stepped up to greet him. Alan was thinking maybe with some luck, he could actually, finally, have a normal conversation with a noble. But as soon as he turned to greet her, he recognized her face from the game. He knew that if someone approached him first, it usually spelled trouble. Her name was Kalia Zenonia. Alan was surprised she introduced herself, since she was actually kind of famous in a don't mess with her family way. The Zenonias were the Western version of his own family, clever, sneaky troublemakers. In Alan's mind, if his family was a gang, Kalia's family was like an undercover mafia. He thought it would be dangerous to get close. But, trying to play it smart, Alan complimented her looks. Kalia thanked him and said she'd love to talk more, but Alan made an excuse they were being watched and he'd rather not make a scene. Kalia, teasing, said he really was just like the rumors and told him she looked forward to seeing him again. Alan was left confused, not sure if that was good or bad. Meanwhile, Rinny and the Blue Moon group were keeping everything under control on their end. She confirmed the Altia situation was contained, but Deus had a concern Alan was being watched again. The team reminded each other to just keep an eye out and eliminate any threats if needed. They knew how important Alan was to them, but also that they must not let things get messy. The next day, Alan and Evan went out on an adventure. Evan asked if they'd arrived at the right place, the canyon Alan was searching for. Even though it was midday, the canyon was super dark and spooky. Alan told him that this was his real goal all along. Evan complained that if it was another dead end, he was going to break down and cry. But Alan said, nope, this one is for real. In the game, this labyrinth was easy to find, and the main reason Alan traveled all the way south was to find the Labyrinth of Whispers. This dungeon had 8 rooms, each with riddles to solve, and if you made it, you got a seriously strong artifact as a prize. Alan knew the routes and puzzles by heart from all his game grinding back on Earth, but seeing it in real life was super intense. The entrance looked freaky and mysterious. Evan said it almost didn't feel real, that someone must have built it for some reason. He asked his boss how he even knew about such a hidden place. Alan dodged the question, saying he had his ways, insisting they just head in before Evan asked any more questions. They walked in, and right away, they saw monsters being crushed by these huge stone hands. Evan pointed out that if they got any riddles wrong, those giant hands would smash them flat. No pressure, right? For our boy? Of course, it's easy. He could finish this dungeon with all his eyes closed. Alan just solving another riddle, like it was no big deal. Evan was starting to lose it a little. He asked how Alan could stay so chill when the place was full of traps, monsters, and who knows what. Evan thought about how they've worked together for 4 years now, but Alan still made no sense. His goals seemed totally random, and most of the time, Alan never even left the estate. But somehow, he always knew where to go and what to do in the craziest places. A couple of minutes later, after all the crazy traps you often only see in the hardcore game, the last puzzle finished, a mechanism clicked, and the final doors opened up. Alan felt so relieved but also dizzy because he'd strained his neck trying to act all cool. He and Evan walked into the treasure room. There were piles of loot everywhere, but Alan just wanted to take the weirdest looking thing, a plain ring. Evan thought it looked super boring, but Alan explained that picking up anything else would only bring big trouble. This ring was the only thing he wanted, the Oath of Restraint. Alan told Evan there wouldn't be any more danger on the way out. Honestly, it looked super easy. He knew every twist from the game walkthroughs. But Evan, ever the pessimist, pointed out the piles of rocks. He said, "Yeah, those were golems for sure, and golems were never a good sign." Evan thought this was a new, unknown problem and told Alan to start finding an escape route as soon as possible, just in case. But Alan was ready. He walked forward calmly, telling Evan he'd handle it. Evan wanted to trust him, but as the giant golems started waking up and lumbering toward them, he yelled again that second-tier magic would not be enough. Alan just raised the ring and shouted that he invoked the Oath of Restraint. And suddenly, bam! All the golems froze. Like somebody hit the pause button on the game. It was completely silent. All Alan could hear was a mysterious voice saying, "Oh, Fragment, inheriting the great will of Nyakula, speak the restrictions you wish to enact." Alan was shocked in the game. This part showed up as a menu, not a real voice. Now there was a face too, forming out of nowhere. It felt way too real. Alan knew that the Oath of Restraint was an absorption-type artifact that let the user set limits on themselves in exchange for crazy power. So, the voice told Alan to speak his first restriction. Alan said he would always do the hand signs of Babylonia when he used magic. The voice asked him what he wanted in return. Alan said he wanted the power to twist the laws of the world a little further. The voice said, "Granted." Alan kept going. For his second restriction, he said he'd also chant the words of Babylonia every time he used magic. The voice wanted to know what he wanted from that. Alan asked for even more power, enough to break the rules of the world. The voice suddenly paused, and Alan got super nervous, thinking he might have messed up, but then it worked. The voice accepted his requests, saying he, a human who remembered the gestures and mysteries of a forgotten god, would inherit this power. She even thanked Alan, saying she would be watching him forever. Spooky as hell. At that moment, the ring dissolved into Alan's hand. He was pretty sure the restrictions were set and the power-up was real. Even he thought it was wild. And what the hell is inheriting the forgotten god's will? He never heard such a thing from the game. Back to the moment in the labyrinth, time started up again. Evan was still yelling that second-tier magic was useless. Alan looked at his little lightning spell and realized how weak it appeared. Even pouring all his mana into it, he couldn't do much. But now it was time to try out his new, restricted, hyper mode, the one he'd unlocked by paying his price. He wonders how strong he would get after absorbing this new power. Alan then started chanting softly. His mana began swirling around him, like blue mist or a mini tornado. He focused and said to himself for his first trick, refraction. The blue energy around him got super intense. Next, he used repulsion. Suddenly, the energy exploded outward, blasting like fireworks, and even the room felt it. If anybody was watching, they'd probably think, "Wow, this was totally nuts." But Alan still wasn't done. He powered up and thought, blue light. Beams of brilliant blue lightning shot out from his orb. That would have been enough for most people, But our MC was different. He started making complicated hand signs. His hands moved so fast, it was like he was doing a crazy dance battle. He used line of diffraction. Suddenly, the magic exploded out from Alan. Lightning shot everywhere, lighting up the entire canyon like it was daytime for 1 second. The golems didn't even have a second to understand what happened. The spell hit them so hard they didn't just break. They turned to dust and small bits of rock. In one big magic blast, Alan just erased them from existence. Not a single golem left standing, bro. Every piece was just rubble now. Behind Alan, Evan was watching all of this. He looked like he had just seen a ghost eat a hamburger or something. His jaw was wide open, and he didn't even try to hide his surprise. Dude was basically frozen in shock. After all that action, the room became super quiet. Alan and Evan just stood there, kind of like two superheroes after a big fight, surrounded by broken golems. Evan finally managed to mumble that he had never seen anything like that before, not even in his 15 years as a mercenary. He wanted to know if his boss had been secretly strong this whole time. He thought, the fuck? Was Alan some secret archmage or what? There's no way that magic was only second circle magic, which, in their world, was supposed to be pretty basic. Our boy just said that he hadn't been hiding anything. It was really just second circle magic, not fancy, high-level stuff. But honestly, he felt a little surprised too. 'Cause in his mind, back when he played Psychedelia, magic was kind of like in a turn-based video game. In the game, each turn a player could do things like make hand signs or say magic words, and every turn this made their magic a bit stronger. Like getting a plus 10% attack power-up. What he did earlier was just boost his chain lightning spell by doing 4 chants and hand signs, so it took him 5 turns to charge up his attack. Because of the restraint he got after receiving the artifact earlier, he always had to use big hand signs and special words when casting any spell. It made things harder, but probably that's why the magic also got much stronger. After walking out of the cave, our boy stretched his arms and looked pretty pleased with himself. He didn't expect second circle magic to be so powerful. It was kind of overkill. Even Alan, who was usually calm, was impressed with how strong the attack was. He said to himself that the results surprised him big time. He won't think again. Thinking too much is not our boy's style. Evan, though? Dude was wiped out. He slumped down on a log, looking like he wanted to take the world's longest nap. Evan said that all this walking and fighting was worse than any battle. He even wondered who in their right mind would make a place this mean. Alan thought about it for a bit. He remembered reading somewhere that the Maze of Whisper was also called something else. He remembered seeing info on a game forum online. The forum posts popped into his head. Someone wrote that the map and guide to the maze were posted on the community website, and another person asked what Maze of Palaon even meant. Somebody else replied that the maze was called Maze of Whisper, and that Palaon was the one who made it. Alan realized that the name had changed over time. Now people were calling it the Maze of Palaon. So, Alan said out loud that Palaon was the person who created the maze. Evan just stared at him, completely confused. Our protagonist didn't bother to explain more. He simply told Evan it was time to go back east. Evan, still dizzy, commented that his boss was more hardworking than he looked. Alan, in his head, kept thinking about what happened with the magic. He noticed that, unlike the game where only the numbers changed, in this world, he could actually see the spell physically changing with each incantation and hand sign. He wasn't sure why yet, but maybe it was because his mana control was really strong, even though he didn't have much mana. He thought he should try out more experiments after resting. So, the two of them, Alan and Evan, got back on their horses and got ready to leave the terrible maze behind. Alan thought to himself that he was just happy that everything turned out fine after all that mess. Without them knowing, near them, a woman with light green hair has been looking at them since earlier. She was wearing a hood and looked mysterious. She then got down and saw the glowing rune marks in the cave rocks. And tada! The girl was Rinna. She knew about ancient gods, forgotten times, and the old Alanef Empire. She knew all this because she was born with something called the Ancient Library in her mind. It was her great mission to collect all this lost knowledge. In her mind, she kept thinking that Alan was super special. Especially since someone crazy like the Bloody Queen, Utia, was willingly following his every order. Almost like Alan held her life or something. Still, Rinna never imagined that Alan, who is the Great Moon, knew about Palon. Plus, Alan whispered something that wasn't even inside her ancient library when he cast his magic. She was deeply puzzled about his boss. Just what was he? After this, Rinna felt stupid. Udia had actually been right about Alan. Their Great Moon is so strong that she was embarrassed just blindly following his order. Alan must have a bigger plan for every mission. Suddenly, she sensed someone coming. A second hooded figure landed right in front of her. This was Deus. Rinne asked him for the information. Deus said he had none, because the Dark One was already dead. His head had twisted suddenly in the air. That was seriously spooky. Rinne said that they needed to report this event for processing, whatever that meant. Then the two of them vanished into the night, fast and silent as shadows. Meanwhile, in a huge, beautiful mansion in Zenonia County, Kalia Zenonia sat alone in a fancy room, staring out a big window. She thought about all the rumors she heard about Alan, how his eyes were emotionless and deep, almost like he didn't care about anything. She found it interesting that Alan called her famous, even though she stayed away from public events. Suddenly, she spoke to her father in a cold, direct way. He sat behind a desk writing, but something was off. Kalia was using a dark aura and secret power to control him like a puppet. Nobody else knew. Everybody thought her dad was the real boss. She thought to herself, how did Alan figure out her big secret so fast? She remembered talking with Alan before. He'd said there were too many eyes on them, meaning spies. She realized Alan noticed the tales, the people she used to watch him. She was surprised by how clever Alan was. All at once, there was chaos in the house. An aide ran down the hall super fast calling for her. The aide said something bad happened in her room. When Kalia entered her room, she found the shadowy corpse of the Dark One lying dead on her floor. The aide said that the magic seal didn't even activate, so the Dark One didn't spill any secrets. Some very dangerous person brought the body here on purpose, to threaten her. Kalia clenched her fists as a red, snake-like aura showed up behind her. She felt mad and worried. Alan had found her greatest weakness on the very first meeting. What a mess. Meanwhile, Alan was finally safe, sleeping inside a carriage, leaning on Evan. He looked totally at peace for once, like he didn't have any worries. Somewhere else, Loria was inside a carriage in front of Altia Ducal Estate. But let me tell you, she was not having a good day. She thought about our boy Alan like he was some sort of big-shot guy from the underworld. She thought he was scary and sharp, kind of like her dad. She said to herself that this was the last person she could ask for help, but sadly, he won't help, because he never accepts a bad deal. Bro, if she knew our boy was just stupid, that would be hilarious. Anyway, she was just nobody in this ducal house. Loria had lost all her money and power because her sneaky brothers and sisters took everything. She pretty much had nothing left, dude. When Loria arrived at the massive stairs of the house, she felt alone and clueless. She thought she survived this long only because her dad loved her, but now, she had no idea what to do. Suddenly, a maid ran out, looking totally freaked. The maid told her something terrible. Loria's siblings, Piran and Keeg, had just, well, they ended their own lives. Loria stood there, in total shock. It made absolutely no sense, bro. These siblings were known for backstabbing and causing drama, and now they had just ended it themselves? She couldn't believe it. Loria wanted to know what happened to her other siblings, Tamalian and Marianne. The servants were so scared they could barely speak. Another maid yelled and begged their master not to do it. But when Loria came to see the room, she saw both of her siblings had already died, each with a giant sword through them. Dude, it was gruesome. At the same time, up on the roof, a mysterious figure with white hair looked down. He thought to himself that the job was done. Well, that's Radon, one of the great sins. Anyway, Loria tried to understand all this, but she just couldn't. Suddenly, she remembered something Alan once said about good things happening. Now she realized it meant something much darker. Alan had been waiting behind the scenes, ready to take control, and she noticed that now she was the only one left in her family. Just like Alan, he killed all his siblings to be the count. And now, it's happening to her. Yikes. Loria looked around the giant empty hall and thought that maybe she had made a deal with the devil himself. She was terrified, but she knew she couldn't back down now. She remembered that there were many examples of what happened to people who betrayed this mysterious mastermind. So, she told herself that she just had to keep going forward with the path she chose. Time jumped ahead, and 2 months later Alan was sitting in his office at Palacio Mansion. A servant entered with a box. He said the Duke of Altia had sent him something. Evan got excited because the box had a crazy expensive bottle of wine inside, worth thousands of gold. Our boy looked closer and noticed the label. It was from Loria, the youngest one, not the old Duke. Alan started to feel a little bad because he thought he couldn't help Loria much when she needed it. Then, he checked again if the wine was really for him. The messenger said that now Loria, the Duke herself, really sent him this wine. Of course our stupid MC was shocked. What? How the fuck had Loria become the boss? Meanwhile, Loria was in her big new office back at the Altia estate. She stretched for a bit, thinking that 2 months had gone by super fast. After her dad's funeral, she became the new Duke. Before, she couldn't even step into this office. The deaths in her family happened so quickly, but nobody blamed her because she was at the ball that night. Even crazier, Loria's siblings had destroyed her secret team, so when she got home, she was really powerless. Maybe that night was supposed to be her death night, but everything changed 180 degrees. She realized that Alan must have used this whole situation for his own plan, and she was shocked. He looked chill on the outside, but secretly, he cleaned up all the mess. She wondered just how far ahead Alan could plan. She didn't even tell him about the funeral because she didn't want to bother him, but he helped her anyway. She somehow thought that Alan probably needed the Altia name for something big, maybe for his hidden agenda. She then walked past her family's old portraits and thought that now all the Altia groups were under her control. But she was still not strong enough to match Alan's hidden power. She figured that Alan was interested in nobody like her because he could use her as the Altia Duke to move in the world of politics from the shadows. Now, Loria just had to do her job and wait for this distinguished one to contact her. She hoped her gift of wine made a good impression. Dude, our boy keeps making everyone think he was some smartass hidden boss or something. Funny as hell. Back at the Palacio mansion, Alan watched the door after the messenger left. He thought it was nuts that Loria, once almost killed, was now the Duke. Something just felt off. More time passed, and it was now a few months later, 5 years before the main story even began. It was snowy outside Palacio Estate. Evan came in and started calling Alan Count, even though Alan hadn't done the official ceremony yet. Our boy sighs. This was not what he planned for his life. He hoped for a chill, drama-free life, maybe with food adventures. But hey, life was life. Evan then gave Alan a letter from Utia, and our protagonist asked if there was any news about the people who killed Leo. Evan didn't have anything new, but he said the Information Guild was looking into it. So Alan decided to just be ready for anything weird to happen. Our boy read the letter from Utia, who updated him about everyone. The group was doing great. Deus was now a professional with puppet shows. Solrang loved playing games. Rene read books and made things, and even Radon was working in his own garden. This routine of exchanging letters made Alan feel pretty happy, even if he had never met them for real. They sounded like a nice kid from the letter. Then our MC started to wonder about the kids, who were now grown up. When he asked their age, Evan explained that the children could now go into society. Even some of the kids had left the orphanage. Alan remembered he had brought them together because they were hurt and to stop them from being the deadly sins, but now he thought it was time for them to move on. He cared enough to stop them from turning evil, so he believed they would be fine. He then remembered each person's special talent. Utia was all about turning faith into power, Deus was good with swords, Rina loved studying, Solrang was a fighter, and Radon had a special gift too. He felt confident that if they used their talents well, they'd rock it. Now he stood up, feeling super pleased with himself, and decided he'd give each of them a nice farewell gift. Alan quickly finished the letters and sent Evan to deliver them. He thought that maybe in the future, these kids would become big shots and surprise him. He hoped they'd read his letters and fly high, just like the birds he saw going into the bright sky. Yeah, that won't happen, bro. Anyway, over at the orphanage, the now grown-up Utia stood with the other four. Wow, she's so pretty now, dude. And everyone looked so cool too. No wonder they are the villain. Utia then told them that orders had come, but this time each one got their own personal letter. Looking at the letter, everyone was so happy to get the letter from their great moon. Solrang got all hyped. Deus smiled a little. Rinny held her letter gently. Radin looked calm and cool, and Utia looked really respectful. Each of them was holding on to their future, wondering what their master is going to tell them to do next. Suddenly, Utia told the group that they should read the older letters too, because these letters were on a whole other level. Ordinary people won't get the order from the Great Moon, because he purposely made the order secret to the naked eye. Hearing that, Solrang asked if they were really allowed to read them. Utia nodded, seeing how Alan had given each of them letters, which meant he had decided it was time to let them see the order themselves. But after reading it, trying to find any hidden message, Solrang just sighed. It just sounded like normal small talk, like someone asking how their friends were doing. Utia charged in, explaining that every word written has meaning. Like when Alan said he was kicked by his brother, it means they need to kill him. Or, when he said leave the orphanage to her, that means he gave her the order to be the leader of Blue Moon and personally take care of this group since Alan picked them himself. Deus started to realize that all of this is to prevent information leaks. Radon and Solrang kept talking. If Alan wanted to give him an order, why not use a magic device, since it's proven to be safe too? Bro, that's too much for Utia, since she is Alan's biggest simp. She shut them up and said, the Great Moon words are fact, and they just need to follow his order. Damn, she is scary. Even Deus got chill, realizing Utia trusted Alan too much. He just doesn't get it. Everyone then started to read their letters, and Solrang almost cried because the letter urged her to the colony. Damn, she didn't want to go to a desert. Deus said the order told him to go to Caliburn, which was a kingdom of knights. Rina said she had to go to Larthania, the maze city. Radon just wonders why he needs to go to Raxus, the entertainment city. Utia smiled. She was heading to Rosario, the holy kingdom. She then checked. Was everyone aware of the hidden mission written in their letter? Deus still didn't know the reason for his job, but the order must be for him to become a knight. Solrang also said the boss promised to keep helping them, so they don't need to worry. Rinne added that gifts were waiting for them in certain places, and they'd see what those were later. Yudia gave her last warning. Everyone should never mention the name Blue Moon unless the boss said it was okay. From that day on, all 5 great sins embarked on their own journey. And bro, everyone keeps thinking that Alan is some kind of genius. I loved it. Now, 3 months have passed. The story jumped to a sunny day in Alan's office. He sat at his desk, surrounded by a mountain of books. He looked super bored, like, why am I even here? He thought to himself that, after 3 months, he still found nothing in his books about the magic and secret phrases. He guessed he'd have to test things himself. He then asked Evan how the search was going for Leo's killer. Evan said the Information Guild had nothing yet. Bummer. Our boy worried to himself that saving the 5 sins might have caused some big butterfly effect trouble. Like Loria, who should have died, had become super powerful and was now Duke Altia, controlling a ton of stuff in the underworld. In the end, he decided to stop the investigation about the assassin. He thought that if he dug too deep, something bad might happen, and honestly, he didn't want to get wrecked by a secret gang for no reason. He ordered Evan to drop the case. Evan agreed. But then Evan shared some new gossip. Deus had just become a knight in Caliburn. What? That's too sudden, but somehow he felt good. Like a proud father, he thought Deus was doing great. Soon, another 3 more months passed. Alan and Evan sat on a bench in a busy town square, eating some tasty meat skewers. Life was chill. Evan called Alan Count and said that Deus didn't just become a knight, he made his own knight order. Whoa, that was insane. Our protagonist was shocked. He knew that to make a whole knight order, you needed to be super strong, at least an expert or even better. There were 3 big levels: sword user, sword expert, and sword master. Our boy thought it was wild, because Deus only became a knight not that long ago. Evan explained that everyone was talking about Deus these days. People said the world would soon see the 5th Master Knight in less than 10 years. Dude, Deus basically almost became a sword master in just 6 months. 6 more months went by. By now, a full year had passed since the 5 sins left their old orphanage. Alan was getting used to his job as Count, but Evan rushed in with some more news. He told him that Deus had become one of the swords of Caliburn, the 5th Master Knight. Alan almost fell out of his chair. What the fuck? Only sword masters could become master knights, right? Our boy remembers that a sword master of psychedelia was superhuman. They could use a special power called derivation, 1 step above Aura Blade. Wait! Our boy asked if Deus was really a sword master now? Evan nodded. Deus was almost there. He hadn't made his own derivation yet, but the country gave him the Master Knight title anyway. Deus even beat the 4th sword in a duel. Well, the kingdom needed a new Master Knight because they lost one in a war with the northern barbarians, so Deus's presence was instantly recognized. Yeah, war. Our boy remembered that war had lasted more than 10 years. No wonder they needed new heroes. Evan explained that learning mana control usually took 15 years, and getting derivation took a few decades. So, Deus is just on track and only needs to wait to get his derivation. He also remembered Reinhardt, who became the youngest Master Knight ever at the age of 32. That Reinhardt was a total beast. Even with his talent, it took him over 20 years to make it that far. Alan knew that man. He was one of the supporting characters in the game. And now, here was Deus, a kid who knew nothing about swords, about to become even better? That was nuts. He started dreaming about getting help from Deus sooner than he thought. Maybe he could leech off that fame, huh? But nope, he was getting too excited. After all, Deus never wrote back the letter to him. He only got letters from Utia, who always kept him up to date about the 5 sins and their new lives. He thought the sins could at least thank him for the gifts, since he was the guy who helped them, right? But those brats never even once wrote back. That kinda stung. Nah, dude, he rubbed his face and told himself to chill out. At least the 5 sins hadn't destroyed the kingdom yet. This was enough. As long as they were happy, Alan was happy. Sometimes that's just how it goes, bro. Bro, I think I know why. Udia is the one who probably told them to never reply and just let her do her usual job to report back. Classic. Anyway, let's check out Caliburn, the city of knights. It was dusk, and the sky looked awesome. There was a huge mansion where the solar eclipse knights lived. Soldiers trained hard in the yard, yelling and swinging their swords. Inside, Deus stood by a big window, wearing super spiky black armor. Wow, he looked like a boss. He was more mature now, and he looked serious. Outside the window, a girl smiled and called him brother. And surprise, that was enough to make this cold man smile. Then, Deus had a flashback. He remembered the time when things were super bad for him. He lost everything because of scary black monsters. The memory always made him feel angry. After he got attacked and lost his sister, every feeling only turned into rage. He thought about sitting in a cell, holding a piece of something broken, probably feeling hopeless. Deep inside, he knew the fact that the Great Moon had saved his life always made him thankful, but that was not enough to make him loyal. Utia reached out to him and promised that he could get revenge with his own hands. That's why he listened to the Blue Moon's orders. Working for the Blue Moon was tough and dangerous, but he didn't care about his own safety anymore. He just wants revenge. For years, he did hard missions to train for fighting those black monsters. Then, one day, he got a personal order for the first time. Back then, he was confused by his order. The letter said there was a gift waiting for him at a small hotel in southern Caliburn. He didn't care much at first. What could it be anyway? But that night, when he walked up to the hotel, well, it's just a simple place, with a wooden door. He opened it, and bright light filled the room. He wondered what surprise could be in there. Then he saw a young girl with the same hair color as him, holding a broom. It was his sister. That's the time he got his feeling back. To be honest, he was totally shocked, and tears filled his eyes. He dropped to his knees and hugged her tight. In his heart, Deus knew that his family, the one he thought was lost forever and meant more to him than his own life, was being given back to him by his master, Alan. He then called his sister with her name, Siley. Both of them felt super emotional because Deus had believed that Siley was dead. But, bro, surprise! She was alive this whole time. He wanted to know what happened after he lost her. Siley held his hand with tears in her eyes. She told him that she had to wait for her turn in a really dark place for a long time. It sounded like total crap. She was just a kid, stuck alone in a cage. But when it became her turn to be killed, something wild happened. A burst of light saved her, and someone helped her to escape. But, dude, it didn't stop there. A few years later, Siley almost got sold to a slave merchant. That's when a mercenary named Evan came out of nowhere and saved her. Finally, she was out of danger. She said that after that, she got some really precious medicine from a sponsor. There was even a special card that said the sponsor would keep sending medicine and support, and that she didn't need to worry about her sibling. The card had the name Alan Palacio on it. Back at the reunion, Deus looked at the card and felt super stunned. Siley was so grateful for what Alan had done for her. That made Deus feel conflicted. He started thinking hard about everything, like, how did the Great Moon even know about his family? He never told anyone about Siley, and even Utia only knew that the Black Lamb had taken him. Deus gripped his arm and looked down, still trying to figure it out. Then, things got trippy. He was in a dark room with puzzle pieces falling all around him. In his mind, he remembers that Utia said Alan knows everything. Yes, that must be it. All his questions fit together like a puzzle and disappeared. He understood now why someone as strong as Utia always feels anxiety when she does something behind Alan. She once said that a sword shouldn't think for itself. That hit Deus hard. He realized that he had been the foolish one all along. Alan already knew everything from the beginning and was gathering children with talent to be his sword. Yeah, everything. Every single thing happened in his plan. Deus was sweating, with his eyes wide, suddenly getting it. When his sister called him, Deus thought that he, as Alan's sword, dared to act on its own. But why did his boss keep being generous and merciful, even giving him the biggest present in his life? As he keeps drowning in revenge, the Great Moon is the one taking care of his sister. Utia's last word is how they will soon realize why she follows Alan. Yeah, she wasn't just being fanatic, nor was she blindly trusting him. It all makes sense. Now, his new mission was clear to him. He wanted to become the best knight, the master knight, and make his own knight order full of the best swordsmen out there. That must be it, his own mission. He will be the second most loyal sword for the Great Moon. Back to the present, a guard came to Deus and called him captain. He said it was time. Then Deus walked toward his own army. He thought to himself that this expedition would be the first step for the solar eclipse. There was a huge army of knights in uniform, all ready to go. Deus gripped his sword and decided that it didn't matter what kind of trouble came his way. He would wait for the day when he could thank Alan and give him something that would make him happy. He raised his sword towards a black eclipse in the sky and told himself to prove it under the moon. Soon, the solar eclipse knights marched through the snowy mountains. They were on an expedition to fight the barbarians. Sounds like a pretty epic quest. But while all this was happening, Alan was chilling in a peaceful courtyard. Bro doesn't know his minion was farming XP for him. He leaned against a stone wall with a stack of books next to him, feeling super relaxed. He thought it was peaceful because all his kids were grown up now. Our boy then looked at the book, and his reports were finally finished. There were all kinds of notes and magic analysis. At least our MC is not just lazy around. He thought about how, in this world, the special hand signs and phrases of Babylonia were long forgotten, so he had to research it all by himself. He had been analyzing magic phrases and how they changed spells. He was learning that stuff like refraction could make a spell stronger but also spread its range. Repulsion could crush the form of a spell and change how it worked. And then there was line of diffraction, which could make a spell pierce through things. He made sure to remember the important rules. No mismatched phrases, no repeating the same one, and only up to 4 allowed in a spell. If you mess that up, bro, the spell fails. Plus, since our boy only had enough mana for 1 magic spell a day, it took him a long time to figure all this out. There weren't even any books or records about this old magic in the world, so he had to do all the research himself. Even though he learned magic to protect himself, he found out he was actually having a good time. After all that studying, our protagonist was ready to test 2 months of experiments. He stood up looking really hyped, and sparks of electricity started to crackle around him. He held out his hand, and a magical interface appeared. He used the spell Blue Light, which powered up electrical magic. Suddenly, a massive sphere of electrical energy formed over him. It looked epic but also super unstable. That's why the next step is fixation. Why? Because he realized that even the order of the phrases mattered. When he had tried breakdown first before, it blew up in his face. That was a major fail, dude. And now, after compressing, the last step would be breakdown. After that, a big magic blossomed. Our boy just nodded. Yeah, his experiment is working this time. But suddenly, in a nearby corridor, Kalia and an old man were trembling and said it was impossible. They were so shocked by what Alan was doing. The old man realized that our boy was using origin magic, which means he was strong enough to be called a 7th circle mage. That was a super high level. Alan was just confused, bro. He couldn't believe he was hearing. What the fuck, 7 circle? Him? The hell? How can a 1 circle like him skip 6 circles and become a super high-level mage? That old man must be crazy. After all the drama, Kalia and the mage were waiting in the reception room. To be honest, she looked like she wanted to cry, but she was also determined as hell. Kalia was thinking to herself that she had 2 reasons for coming here. First, she wanted to see what Alan's real deal was, like, what was he planning, who was protecting him, all that. Second, to detect the level of the organization that protected him and allowed him to take control over Palacio. But now, looking at Viankel, she was shocked how could that sly old mage look absolutely terrified, as if he was about to pee his pants. Viankel, a 5th circle mage banished from the magic tower for his inhumane experiments, can annihilate an entire division of soldiers with ease. Even though he's kept his arrogant attitude toward her, his longtime sponsor, she can sense his fear. She had never seen him like this before. Was that really origin magic that Alan just showed them? Then boom, the big doors opened and there was our MC, Alan, looking a little tired but still calm. With a cold face, he asked Kalia what business she had in his place. They all sat down on the sofa, and Kalia apologized for just dropping in, trying to act all sweet about it. But Alan was having none of it. He told her not to worry, but wanted to clear up something. He said what she just saw was definitely not origin magic. He told them if they had to put a level on his power, he was just a 2nd circle mage, barely above a rookie. Alan pretty much told them his magic was useless for fighting or defense, hinting hard that they better not go gossiping about what happened here. Hearing all of that, Viankel and Kalian just shivered and were so scared. Basically, they thought what Alan said was for them to be quiet about what they saw earlier. In the end, that mage just nodded and agreed, pretending like he saw everything wrong even though he was sweating buckets. Kalia was totally shocked. Viankel was acting like this and polite. Anyway, Alan let out a little sigh, like, bro, thank God that misunderstanding is over. Then Alan told them to just get to the point already, but Kalia said she was just visiting after finishing her other stuff. Our boy wasn't buying it, but she kept saying nope, no special reason. In the end, Alan said he was busy anyway and couldn't hang out long. So Kalia stood up, thanked him for his time, and said they'd be leaving now. Alan, still cool as ever, told her if she needed someone to talk to, maybe she should try the Duchess of Altia. He thought they'd get along. Kalia was surprised for a second, then gave a little secret smile and said sure, she'd pay her a visit. She curtsied and walked out, Viankel following her. Outside, Alan and his right-hand man, Evan, watched Kalia's fancy carriage roll away. Evan asked what the hell is a Zenonia, a ruined family from the West, doing here? Well, Alan had no clue either. He just said he couldn't even guess. He was sweating inside, thinking this could get real messy. If people started saying he used origin magic, all the crazy strong fighters out there would line up to pick a fight with him. He was like, dude, this world is just non-stop trouble. He just hoped those 2 understood what he was really saying, and honestly, he just wanted Kalia to go away from his life. And well, there's no way Zenonia would visit Altia, the family who's competing with them in the underworld, so everything's gonna be okay, right? Well, no way, bro. I bet they would become allies because of you. Meanwhile, inside the carriage, Kalia was still trying to figure out if Alan had really used origin magic. Viankel, still shaking, told her it wasn't. She asked why he'd freaked out so much. Then Viankel started explaining. Origin magic is supposed to rewrite the rules of the world, and only the absolute best can use it. But Alan's magic wasn't like that. It was something else. Viankel remembered using his mage eye to look at Alan's magic, and what he saw was insane. Alan wasn't just painting on the world's rules. He was ripping them up and making new ones. He made a miracle happen, something impossible. But that wasn't even the worst part. The mage's special observing eye shattered when he looked at Alan's magic. Viankel saw some freaky vision, a giant blood-red eye, and Alan surrounded by swirling red and black energy. This was definitely the magic of the forgotten god. Viankel started losing it, holding his head, saying he couldn't think about this anymore or he'd go crazy. He warned Kalia that, back in his younger days, he'd learned ancient secrets, but even he knew this one thing. Do not go against Alan Palacio, or death is going to be waiting for her. Hearing all of that warning, Kalia just smirked a little, like she'd already figured something out. So, something as insignificant as she should never figure out his intention. She told Viankel that she guessed she was just a pawn now, since Alan casually telling her to visit Duchess Altia, and in her mind, she saw Alan like some kind of god playing with them, like chess pieces. She wiped her sweat, trying to look determined, even though she knew she was already caught up in Alan's plans. Then the story jumped ahead, 5 months later, about 2 years since Alan sent the kids out from the orphanage. Alan was in his office, asking Evan if he had any new info, especially about the kids. Evan said nope, but he did have some big news. Zenonia County and Altia Duchy had just formed an alliance. Alan almost fell out of his chair. The top 2 underworld powers teaming up? That sounded like a nightmare. He started panicking inside, thinking he'd sent the 5 great sins off to live normal lives, but now he had to deal with 2 mega masterminds teaming up? Was the whole country just going to explode now? He wondered if Kalia had really listened to his advice about talking with Altia. He kept telling himself it was probably just temporary, but our boy was definitely not calm. He decided to write a letter to Kalia, trying to apologize if he was too cold or blunt before. He gave it to Evan to send out, hoping it didn't sound like he was making excuses. Evan promised to send the letter and keep looking out for the kids. After that, Alan then sat there thinking about Solrang and Radon. He hadn't heard anything from them in a while, and he hoped they were okay. He imagined Solrang, worrying if maybe she was in trouble. He hoped that the letter he gave her, with the location of a hidden treasure, would keep her safe and rich. She could become the pinnacle of all fighters, the Baba Yaga. The description of the item he remembered from the game clearly said, if the sin of pride obtained this, she won't fall into corruption and become a sin. After all, she was talented enough to make it on her own, right? But our poor guy was definitely stressing. Now we move to the desert. Yeah, the nation of fighters, the place where if you're strong, you can do whatever you want. Solrang was just coming out of a cave at night, looking super pumped. She stretched and shouted to the great moon, thanking him for the gift. She was grinning like a maniac, showing off this giant, golden, clawed gauntlet on her arm. She couldn't believe the essence of the Golden Mane tribe was real. She always thought it was just a fairy tale. She remembered being a kid and hearing elders in her tribe talk about the essence, how their wolfkin ancestors were the kings of all beastkin, and this legendary item gave them power and authority. Now she had it, and she'd passed all the trials to get it. She was bursting with golden energy, feeling unstoppable. She then started thinking about Alan, the Great Moon, the guy who saved her from dying in some evil lab. She wanted to pay him back, and she was sure he wouldn't want her to just be some random gladiator. No way, he'd want her to be the best of the best. She looked at her new golden claws and decided right then, she was going to be the strongest gladiator, bring together all the scattered wolfkin, and rebuild the Golden Mane tribe. And she had another goal. She was going to kill the Black Dragon, the monster who killed her parents. Solrang looked up at the night sky, the huge blue moon shining above her, and said in her heart that everything she did was for Alan. She was ready to start, eyes glowing, power crackling all around her. The legend of the Golden Mane tribe was about to begin again, under the blue moon, after 500 years. The next day, Alan was sitting on the couch, looking all serious and businesslike, reading some papers. Evan was there too, and said the Information Guild had found news about the kids, those sins Alan was always worrying about. He started with Solrang, and man, apparently she was performing very well in the colony, and now everyone was calling her the Golden Flash. Alan just sat there, wondering where he'd heard that name before. He didn't remember, but he said he was glad Solrang was doing fine. He figured that in a place like that, if you were strong, you could do whatever you wanted. Next, what about Radon? He said he hadn't heard a peep from the dude since he said he was learning to work in Raxus. Evan replied that there was a bit of info, but they were still checking if it was real. Alan just gave him a hum, but then out of nowhere, hit Evan with the, "Aren't you supposed to be busy?" face. Evan got all nervous, thinking he'd missed something huge. Alan explained he needed Evan to start getting ready, since they'd be heading to the Magic Tower soon. It would take at least a month by carriage. That really got Evan. He jumped right up, shouting about how the trip to the Green Magic Tower only took a week, and he'd never heard anything about going all the way to the blue one. Alan just shrugged and said, maybe he forgot to mention it before. Bro, Evan looked like someone had just told him his vacation got cancelled, but he said he was used to it at this point. Still, a 1-month trip was insane. Our boy reminded him they were actually going to the Blue Magic Tower, which was way farther, near Labyrinth City. Evan finally got it and left the room, mumbling that he'd start preparing right away. Later, Alan flopped onto the sofa. He looked like he'd just lost a battle with his own exhaustion. He was already tired just thinking about being stuck in a carriage for a month, but what could he do? The item he needed for his tiny, precious mana hole was at the Blue Magic Tower. He started thinking about Labyrinth City, the place every gamer remembers for those endless hours of grinding. Yeah, Alan spent a lot of time there back in the game days. The labyrinth was the main spot. Players could get better loot by going deeper down, but nobody ever reached the bottom, not even with cheats. Some dude even posted online about using hacks to get to the 150th floor and still not finding the end. Dude, the devs were trolling everyone. Because of all the crazy relics and artifacts found in the labyrinth, being an official magic appraiser had become a super popular job. Seriously, you do that for a living, and you were basically set for life. Our girl Rinna was about to take the appraiser exam, and he figured she wouldn't have any problems with it. She was that talented. But Alan started worrying that maybe the gift he gave Rinna when she left was kind of weak. It only let her appraise equipment, nothing fancy. He thought he should send her more support if that lame gift wasn't enough. Typical Alan, always overthinking after the fact. Now, we are going to see Rinna in the Labyrinth City. This place was wild. No one ruled here, and it was packed with explorers, mercenaries, and all kinds of weirdos. In one quiet corner, there was a secret appraisal shop called Merde. The shop wasn't flashy, but it was famous for its unique services. Nobles and elite adventurers lined up to get their stuff checked there. Inside, Rinne was running the counter. The Lord of Larthania himself was there, handing her some fancy cup to appraise. Rinne, rocking her green mask, took a look and used her magic. The Lord got all hyped about his relic, asking what kind of power it had now. Rinne told him it could now keep burning with just a bit of mana, for at least an hour. The Lord was blown away, saying the efficiency was off the charts, and thanked her like she just saved his life. Rinne gave him a little nod and a tired smile after he left. After the Lord left, she slumped over the counter, finally able to breathe. She spotted a spyglass on the table and realized it could also be imprinted. And here's the kicker. This shop was famous not just because Rinne was good at her job, but because the imprint she put on these relics was actually a secret gift from her great moon. Yep, Alan himself. She had this super special artifact called the Eye of Neokula, which was basically a magic eat-everything device with a crazy counter on it. Rinne thought back to when Alan told her to become an appraiser. At the time, she had no idea what he was thinking. How was this going to help kill the black things? She remembered his farewell letter, which just told her to get to Labyrinth City and start appraising stuff. She honestly didn't get it, but after seeing the gift, it finally made sense. This was her way to gain power, by sacrificing relics to awaken the artifact. The first time she saw this artifact, it was bound by some red chains. She was confused, because even her infinite library brain didn't know what this item really was. But then the outer shell broke apart, revealing a golden, snake-shaped thing with a giant eye and a counter set to 0. Now, after Rinne broke the seals, the artifact's true power was unlocked. It could imprint another artifact and offer it as a sacrifice. But now, she needed to make 252 more sacrifices before the eye would fully awaken. Every time she found a high-tier relic, she could appraise and mark it, then offer it up to the eye. If she picked the wrong item, the whole count would be minus, so she had to be careful. It's like the artifact is so picky that anyone gonna slap it if it were real. Only someone like her, with her Library of Eternity brain, could pull this off. All this, she said to herself, was for the Great Moon and, of course, to kill the Black Dragon. She held the artifact, feeling proud and ready for anything for her master. Jump forward 3 weeks. Alan and Evan finally arrived at the Blue Magic Tower. The place looked like it came out of some Harry Potter movies, giant, blue, and way over the top. Inside, they met Fenia Krazine, the Vice Tower Master. She looked stressed, standing there surrounded by a mountain of books and scrolls. She told them to hurry up because she was busy, and if they had something to say, spit it out. Alan just stood there, totally calm, but inside he was having a little fanboy moment. He recognized Fenia from the main game storyline. She was supposed to become Tower Master after reaching crazy high-level magic at a super young age. For now, though, she was just the Vice Master, and apparently still stuck with all the paperwork. The Magic Tower is not only strong, but they also monopolizes the magic tools, making their status equal to nobles. Alan then introduced himself as Count Palacio and explained they'd come about the Time Gate problem, and said he could eliminate the Time Gate. Fenia looked at him like he'd just said he could turn trash into gold. She wasn't buying it at all. She explained what the time gate was, a magic crack that led to some weird subspace and caused all sorts of trouble. Monsters and anomalies came out of it, and it was a total mess for the tower. Fenia then used her magic to check Alan out, but all she saw was a guy with barely any magic talent. She couldn't believe he thought he could fix it. She lost her patience and said Alan probably just wanted to look cool because people were saying he only became Count by luck after his siblings died. She let out some of her magic power, filling the room with blue lightning. Feeling the pressure, Alan and Evan looked like they were about to faint. She's scary as heck. Even Evan begged him not to bother her, or they would die in 1 second. Fenia glared at them, looking like she could end the world if she sneezed wrong. Well, but Alan didn't care. He was so fucking desperate. He said that if he failed to close the time gate, he'd give up all his property to the magic tower. Fenia still thought he was just talking trash, but Alan offered to swear an oath if she wanted. He told her it was a good deal for just a bit of her time. Well, it makes sense. Next thing you know, they were in the time gate chamber. Fenia told Alan the deal. If he messed up, she got everything he owned. Our boy nodded and said that wouldn't happen. Anyway, perfect timing. Fenia was thinking this was her chance to find out if Alan was actually a mastermind or just some idiot who got lucky. Unlike the inhuman atmosphere around him, he was a trash with a small mana hole and a bit of talent. Meanwhile, Alan just walked to the center of the room, ready to work his magic. But when looking Alan was doing some weird thing with his hand, Fenia thought he was joking, especially since he was using his hand instead of a staff. She said even ancient magic books called that stuff a fairy tale. She told him to stop pretending, but then Alan started chanting, and the whole room went dark. Fenia was suddenly frozen, like, literally couldn't move a muscle. She freaked out, realizing everything around her had stopped. The time is literally fucking stopping. Using her magic eyes, she saw that the space was ripped off, and a giant red eye was forming, filling the space with some crazy, evil energy. Alan just stood there, calm as ever, while Fenia was losing it. Where the fuck is this monster coming from? Well, using her magic eyes, he started to understand what that eyes was. She was so close to realizing something huge and awful, but somehow, 1,000 creepy voices ringing inside her head, and kept telling her not to think. The voice in her mind kept screaming for her to stop, ordering her to shut her brain off, or else. It was honestly kind of wild. That thing screaming about doom being already decided, like a poisoned cup just waiting for someone to drink. The red eye above her glowed even worse, and a big-ass red hand came down toward her. That eye gave her the last warning. Absolute silence or death was coming. Fenia's face was a mess, tears everywhere, but her eyes were open wide. In that moment, she seemed to get it. At least, she thought she did. She told herself she understood what Alan and that creepy eye wanted from her. The monster eye in the sky slowly closed up, and as soon as it did, everything in the room started to feel normal again. And that's when Alan said, "The gate is closed now." Suddenly, Fenia wasn't frozen anymore, while Alan was still standing there acting like nothing happened. Sigma as hell. He then held up the small, dark relic he got from the gate and decided to just take it with him. Meanwhile, Fenia kept glancing at him, hiding her mouth, looking totally freaked out. Alan thought maybe he'd tricked her, but also thought, maybe not? Suddenly, Fenia freaked out so hard and yelled that she 100% would keep everything secret and begged him to believe her. Our boy got so confused. What the hell is happening all of a sudden? Never mind, he just shrugged and told Evan it was time to go home. Evan was waiting by the door, loyal as ever, but Fenia jumped in their way, desperate. She held out this fancy case, packed with glowing blue mana potions, and offered them to Alan. She was shaking, but she said those potions were homemade, her own special brew. Alan checked them out, thinking holy crap, these things were worth more than a mansion. Just the price alone stressed him out. He took one, while Fenia, looking nervous, asked if he liked them. Honestly, even our MC was shocked. He wondered if maybe she was just super grateful that he closed the gate. Fenia started mumbling about keeping quiet, saying she'd never tell anyone what happened. Even our dumb MC could understand that there must be some misunderstanding now. But bro, she was so desperate, she even grabbed Alan's arm and offered to swear a mana oath if he wanted. He was totally confused and asked if that was really necessary for something like this. But Fenia was already making the oath happen. Blue magic chains appeared out of nowhere, wrapping around both her and Alan, glowing all over the place. Alan had no idea what was happening, thinking she was totally misunderstanding everything. But he just sighed inside, knowing there was no way to clear up this mess. So, in the end, our MC walked away with a priceless relic, 5 super valuable potions, and a magic oath from Fenia. Even though he honestly had no clue why. Cut to later, Alan and Evan were rolling out of there in a super fancy carriage. Evan asked about the relic Alan got from the time gate. It looked basic, but Alan said he needed it anyway. He was just happy to get something called the Mark of the Corrupted, which could suck mana out of the air and hold it. Not a huge amount, but honestly, it was more than his own mana reserves. Bro, that's pathetic. Our MC put the bracelet on, watched it glow, and thought to himself how his own body had less power than a support accessory. Brutal. But he told himself it was fine, since the item was for research and self-defense, not fighting. Meanwhile, Alan was still stuck on Fenia, wondering what kind of misunderstanding she had. She suddenly started acting so polite, and he couldn't figure out why. Back at the Blue Magic Tower, he told her again that he was just a second circle mage, not some big shot, but Fenia just desperately agreed, saying he definitely looked like a weak mage. Her reaction is like Kalia Zenonia from earlier, kinda similar. Shocked, scared, and way too polite. He figured it was uncomfortable, but whatever. He told himself he wouldn't have to see any of these people ever again, so who cares? With that, our MC leaned back and enjoyed the ride, commenting that the weather was nice. Evan agreed. It was peaceful for once. While they chilled in the carriage, the scene moved to a fancy mansion, the Altia Ducal House. Inside, Loria and Kalia were having tea, both acting all proper and polite. Loria said she felt comfortable with Kalia, since neither of them had to worry about power or rank. Then, Kalia started talking about Alan, saying his advice was always amazing. She remembered how he had quietly told her to visit Duchess Altia. When she did, she and Loria realized they were both being influenced by him. With Alan's orders, these two powerful women quickly became allies, deciding there was no point in fighting for the top spot, since Alan was clearly already the number one. They started to talk about Alan's letter. It looked like a normal apology, but Kalia was sure it was actually a secret command. That's why she came here, to discuss the content with the Duchess. So, they both started to decipher the letter like some kind of top-secret text. After a while, they broke down the letter, figured out that Alan didn't like either the aristocratic or royalist faction. Both women got serious, wondering if he was telling them to kill all the old nobles and set up a new regime. They agreed, with Loria saying they still needed to use common sense. Yeah, right, these two were ready to go full revolution if Alan said so. Loria started thinking that Alan only made her Duchess because he needed her family's prestige. If Kalia, the Western power, worked with her, they could pretty much control everything. Kalia smiled and said it was time to talk about the plan. You could just feel the chaos building. Back at the Blue Magic Tower, the Tower Master heard that Alan had closed the time gate. He looked down at Fenia, who was totally wrecked, just slumped over her desk. With that, it was like the puzzle pieces had all moved and solved themselves. I mean, Alan somehow made two of the biggest noble houses and the Magic Tower misunderstood? That was funny. Meanwhile, the boy himself was in his carriage, eating a sweet potato and almost choking on it. Evan offered him some water, but Alan just sighed, saying he wanted to go home. He looked out at the sunset, tired as hell, and thought to himself that it was about time Utia got his letter. And now, Utia, dressed in a white nun's habit, walked slowly through a field of glowing lilies, her red eyes shining in the moonlight. Bro, she becomes so pretty. I believe she was the prettiest among all the sins. Anyway, back to the Magic Tower. So, the old Tower Master, Micardo, knew something felt off to him. He could tell right away that something must have happened to Fenia. When he found her, she was just sitting at her desk, looking like she'd been run over by a horse and then hit by a tornado. For real, she was pale, wiped out, head down on the desk, not even her usual cocky self. The Tower Master asked if she was okay, but Fenia could barely talk. She just said he was back and that she finished all the work he left her. Usually, Fenia would be bossy and loud, probably making fun of him or someone else. He remembered how she was always so full of herself, even making rookies cry. Like, all the time. But he never tried to change her, because he figured once she got strong enough, to the 7th circle, she'd calm down on her own. Because the magic she would see is like an infinite amount of sky, every one of her achievements would feel pointless. That's how it went for most geniuses, right? But now she looked so different, totally quiet and almost scared. The old guy really thought this was getting weird. He tried making small talk, saying his trip up north had been long, and maybe she had too much work while he was gone. But Fenia just looked like she wanted to crawl under a rock and never come out. Then he brought up Alan, saying that the Count had closed the time gate, but Fenia couldn't explain how because she made an oath. That's when Micardo really started paying attention, because Fenia never got humble like this, unless something insane happened. He even tried to pat her on the head, but she didn't smack his hand away, which for her was almost a miracle. The old guy figured out that whatever magic Alan used must have been wild. Maybe even the legendary origin magic. You could tell he was getting excited now, smirking and whispering to himself about Alan Palacio from Asteria Kingdom. He said that guy was interesting. Super interesting. Now, jump to a month later, back to our hero's place, the Palazzo Mansion. Alan was finally home and actually doing research for real this time. After getting his hands on the mark of the corrupted, he started practicing his magic a lot. You could see him outside, making these cool blue glowing orbs, staring at his messy notebook full of rules and ideas about using phrases. He was feeling pretty good, since now he could use more spells every day. He figured out a new rule about using those magic phrases, but he still wasn't sure how it all worked. Like, maybe it mattered where or how he said them? He didn't know, but he kept trying. Evan, his loyal sidekick, suddenly told him that his magic just kept getting stronger every time he saw it. Alan was surprised because he didn't think it was that different from before. But when they looked over at the giant crater Alan made in the yard, even our hero had to admit that normal gravity magic shouldn't do that. Second circle magic like that was supposed to be weak, not blowing holes in the ground. So, he started to wonder if maybe he really was getting stronger and wasn't just imagining it. Alan kept thinking it through, trying to figure out if he was just getting more skilled or if there was something else going on. Maybe he got better because of the phrase's proficiency? After all, phrases are closer to trigger words that alter attributes. Like when he always uses gravity magic with a phrase, he becomes proficient, and the power goes higher. After all the work he did, he decided the power only grew little by little if he messed with the order of the phrases. He told himself it had to be an illusion, because there was no reason for his spells to suddenly get way stronger. Maybe he was just in a good mood or something, right? Well, that's a possibility, but this sudden power-up is too sudden. It's like a reward for curse in the game or something. Like, getting a curse will give him a debuff, but also give him a compensatory reward. But nah, he don't feel cursed or what? Dunno. It feels more like he got a receiving faith buff. But nope, he was just a small count. Who the fuck is gonna make him a god? Well, nothing made any sense, so he just shrugged it off and walked off with Evan, telling himself that nothing bad would happen from being a bit stronger. Yeah, right, famous last words. Meanwhile, in the holy city of Chernonia, the capital of Rosario, this place looked straight out of a dream, with white buildings and a big moon spire in the middle. There, Udia was outside, looking like some kind of goddess herself. She greeted a knight, Sir Loke, who knelt down in front of her, acting like she was royalty. Dude said they'd saved a bunch of people and thanked Utia for all her help. She smiled, acting all humble, and told him it was really his good deeds, not hers. But the knight explained that she is the one who taught her, an ignorant one, so he will always be grateful. He was all emotional about it. He remembered how he'd spent 20 years in despair, feeling nothing from the goddess, and was about to give up before Utia's advice. She told him that if he really wanted something, he should put his faith in the moon. Of course, the knight asked why she told him to believe in the moon, and Utia gave him a little speech about faith and how it's easier to believe in something you can actually see. The knight was totally lost, but Utia just smirked and told him that he'd get it once he tried. The poor guy was so desperate, he said he was willing to give anything a shot. Then she gave him this pretty smile, her eyes glowing like a vampire or something, and said that the moon would always be with him. So he started praying to the moon, just like Utia said, and, no joke, he suddenly felt divine power for the first time. Sir Loke finally understood. He figured out that the goddess was kind of like the moon, and that was an easy way for normal people to actually believe. The guy was so happy, but then he got worried he was doing something heretical, like he might get in trouble for praying to the moon instead of the goddess. But it turned out all the magic and power still worked, so he stopped worrying and just kept doing it. So, he just bowed to her for the first time, believing that the moon is the real god in this world. Sensing how other people finally understood how amazing her god is, she turned to Sir Loke, inviting him to pray with her. The guy couldn't thank her enough, and she just smiled that mysterious smile, her eyes glowing red. That night, Utia was walking down the huge cathedral, all eyes on her. She reached the front, told everyone to pray, and put their faith in the great moon. She said everyone could pray with her as much as they wanted, and looked out at the whole crowd, feeling like a total boss. In her head, Utia thought about the person who taught her everything, the one with a glowing crescent moon behind him. Yep, she was totally talking about our MC, Alan, and she was super grateful to him, even if he had no idea. Bro, how the fuck did our stupid protagonist suddenly become a cult god or something? I couldn't believe how misunderstanding is the plot armor in this story. But well, this was fun as heck. Meanwhile, our boy looked so bored, bro, like life had just become a series of meh moments. He was staring at a letter. Yep, yet another report. The poor guy read through it, thinking there was nothing special in today's letter either, just the usual stuff about everyday life. He slumped forward, head on the desk, letting out a big sigh. At least it meant everyone was doing fine, right? That should have been a good thing. But man, You could see it in his eyes, he was feeling a bit lonely. He started thinking how nobody else was sending him letters these days except Utia, even though he worked so hard to help them all. Couldn't blame them though. From their view, Alan was just some random nice guy who helped them out, probably nothing special. Still, he tried to convince himself that he'd done his job, he'd guided the kids, saved the world, all that. So there was no reason to be sad. No reason at all. But, you know, sometimes you say something out loud just to make yourself believe it. In his head, our protagonist tried to meditate and find some inner peace, like really pushing it. But then he thought again, Udia must be super busy, yet she still wrote him all these letters. At least the eldest appreciated him, right? Alan tried to act all tough, but on the inside, he was low-key crying a single tear. Suddenly, Evan popped in, and Alan jumped, complaining that the dude had scared him and asking why he was still around. Evan said he had a report from the Information Guild, something about the kids, and he wanted to tell his boss right away. Alan perked up, pretending not to care too much, but you could tell he was interested. Evan started with Radon and told him that Radon had become a pirate. Dude, our boy had no idea how to process that. He was like, wait, what? Could Evan explain that a bit more? Evan said okay, but they need to talk about the other first. He explained the ones with the most rumors were Solrang and Deus. Solrang, the wolf girl, was killing it with a 32-win streak in the arena, which was a big deal because you needed 100 wins to become the Baba Yaga. Alan started thinking, wait, the best fighter was the Lion King with a 41-win streak, right? He remembered that dude from the game, a beast with clawed gauntlets who once joined the player's party. The colony, where Solrang was fighting, was packed with super strong people, so the fact that she was close to breaking the record, that was insane. Our MC was shocked she might actually become the colony's top dog. Then Evan moved on to Deus. He said Deus's order straight up executed one of the 8 barbarian chiefs, Kurga of the Snowfield. Alan pictured Deus on a snowy, bloody battlefield, holding a banner like some legendary hero. These barbarians weren't just random warriors either. They could turn into monsters with weird rituals. Evan checked if Alan knew who they were. Alan, of course, remembered way too much. Back in the game, those barbarians were a nightmare to deal with, especially their god, Ulultralus. Luckily, he thought, he wouldn't have to mess with them in real life, since that boss only showed up if all the 5 sins joined up. He had some seriously bad memories from that fight. Our protagonist tried to play it cool, saying he wouldn't have to worry about Deus anymore. Evan kept going, saying Deus was now considered as strong as Reinhard the First sword. That one hit Alan hard. He slumped back looking absolutely done. Maybe he really should have visited Deus. That would have been nice, he thought. Next up, Evan shared that Rinna, who worked as an appraiser now, was making black engravings that could make artifacts even more powerful. And Alan thought that was pretty cool, realizing she was doing just fine by herself. But our hero couldn't let go of the pirate thing. He asked if Radon really was a pirate now. Evan explained, a little nervous, that Radon was now the captain of the first archipelago, the biggest one out of the 7 archipelagos near Raxus, the city of fun and chaos. Alan's face went full horror mode. He started having a crisis, hands on his head, yelling that it was impossible. In his mind, he'd been sending Radon money for years, just wishing the guy would live a normal, proud life. Instead, he somehow ended up as a pirate king. Our boy never meant for Radon to become a pirate. He just wanted him to be a treasure hunter. That was supposed to be a nice job. Exploring the sea, finding cool relics, nothing too extreme. Radon was good at finding enemies and, since he was a rare sea godkin, he could swim wherever he wanted. There were so many relics in the Raxus oceans, so Alan had thought that was perfect for him. That's all he wanted. But reality had other plans. Evan tried to comfort him, saying that being a pirate captain pretty much made Radon the lord of the island. He was actually a very important person now. Alan was like, yeah, okay, but how did Radon even take out the old captain? Those guys weren't normal. Every captain was superhuman, someone you could never beat in a fair fight. He wondered if maybe Radon just found the best treasures and used them to get to the top. Back when he played the treasure hunter minigame, Alan spent hours grinding for a relic, so maybe Radon did the same and just hustled his way up. But man, he looked like he was about to faint, thinking this was just how it felt to have a pirate for a son. He tried to accept it, but he honestly thought the universe was messing with him hard this time. Evan checked in, worried if Alan was really alright. Spoiler, he definitely was not. Meanwhile, out in the city of Raxus, things were way more exciting. Raxus was this huge, flashy city on the water, palm trees everywhere, sunshine, blue ocean, and a bunch of wild islands just off the coast. Those islands, the 7 paradises, were basically pirate heaven, and the biggest of them all was the first archipelago. The last pirate captain there was Alcride the Red Slayer, a dude who got his power from the Heavenly King by being super rich. But that all changed. Someone new had stepped up and you guessed it. It was Radon. Standing tall in his new pirate clothes, looking like a boss with the whole city behind him. He went, like he was already used to this life. But then you could see he was thinking hard about something. Radon sat on a stone ledge and wondered about the great moon. He said he never cared much before. At first, he was just grateful to Alan for saving his life, since he was supposed to die as a slave. Because of Alan, he met Utia and found his powers. Mostly, though, he'd been following Utia's orders while working in Blue Moon. But then he got a direct order from the Great Moon, aka Alan, though Radon saw him like this big mystical boss. He lay on a rooftop under the full moon, holding the letter, straight up confused by the order to become a treasure hunter. Honestly, it just made him mad. All he wanted was revenge on the people who ruined his life. He started thinking about the old days, when his clan was secretly living on some island until a bunch of hunters attacked. They massacred his family, split his parents' bodies, and sold him as a slave. As a kid, he watched everything go to hell. His parents were killed right in front of him, and he was chained up, terrified. So, yeah. Radon couldn't really see how digging up old treasure had anything to do with getting revenge. He decided he'd just go through the motions, making it look like he was following Alan's orders, but his heart wasn't in it. One night, while Radon was out on a cliff, he noticed fireworks and a ship party somewhere in the distance. He was about to ignore it, but then he saw the faces of the people who'd killed his parents, now with wanted posters all over town. Those guys had gotten power by doing some twisted ritual, using parts of sea godkin bodies to get strength from the sea god, Clead. Every pirate captain, including the 7 archipelagos' bosses, had that power, and all of them were part of Radon's past trauma. They were killing everyone in his clan and using them like some kind of item to power up. This fucker needs to be dead. As he remembered, he got this look in his eyes, cold, furious. Knowing those hunters had split his parents' bodies into 7 parts. It was personal now. In his head, he wondered how the hell Alan knew about his whole story. He was shocked, mumbling to himself that he'd never told anyone about his past. Seriously, bro. The guy looked like the universe had just dropped a secret on his head. He started thinking that maybe the Great Moon had set up this whole chance for revenge just to keep a promise. But even if that was true, he knew he couldn't just jump in and get payback right away. The problem? His enemies down there were superhuman pirates with freaky sea god powers. You try fighting that with bare hands? Yeah, good luck. But then, something clicked in Radon's brain. If everything was really inside Alan's plan, then even the weird gifts he got must have a purpose, right? He pulled out this golden pendant, and that thing wasn't just for show, it was special. He held it tight to his chest, thinking that maybe the Great Moon set it all up, planning both his revenge and how he would do it. Like, Alan had tossed every piece onto the board, and now it was Radon's move. Our guy started feeling real determined, like he was finally seeing the big plan. Yeah, he had officially gotten into Alan's weird religion. Anyway, in the morning, he dove straight into the sea, no hesitation. Underwater, Radon's pendant was glowing, and his eyes had these blue, light-up specks on them. Dude looked like a magic submarine. And honestly, this pendant was the spectacles of Amrita, and with them, Radon could easily spot relics buried deep in the ocean. Now that's what you call a cheat code. So there he was, swimming down to a chest covered in gems and rings, looking like he'd just hit the jackpot. He thought to himself that these relics were the secret weapon he needed, since he couldn't beat superhuman pirates head-on. He realized that just being grateful for gifts wasn't enough, he had to use them. That night, he was back on the beach, moonlight all around, holding the treasure chest, thinking deeply. The Great Moon kept his promise. And Radon realized Alan hadn't just put his enemies in his path, he'd also given him the power to do something about it. Now, he finally understood Alan's letter. He thought our boy's true order was for him to get revenge and take over all 7 pirate islands. He felt confident, like the whole path was opening up in front of him. But then Utia's voice popped up in his mind, reminding him that everything, literally everything, was for the Great Moon. Radon smiled a little, thinking about that line. He used to not care, but now that idea was stuck deep in his heart, like a light that gave him strength. So he decided, yeah, everything he did was for Alan, his Great Moon. And that was the end of the pirate part for now. Fast forward 3 months, and the scene switched to a country road covered in autumn leaves. It was time for the big fancy party that happened every 2 years in Asteria, and our protagonist Alan was forced to show up. He was riding in his super luxurious carriage, looking straight up miserable as he stared out the window. Seriously, the guy just wanted a nap, not a networking event. He grumbled in his head about how annoying it was to have to go. He said even calling it mandatory every 4 years made him sick. Total mood. Outside, a bunch of rich carriages were coming closer to his carriage. Evan said that the Kryold and Edorn families' carriages had joined up with theirs, just like the schedule said. Alan gave a half-hearted answer, clearly hating all of this. He explained in his head that they all traveled together to avoid getting robbed by bandits, but he thought this was just a weird, annoying tradition. Then he learned that the real problem wasn't even the bandits, it was the nobles. Later that evening, two nobles came up to him, acting all smug. One guy asked how Alan could show up with only one escort, acting like it was some big failure. The other said maybe our MC was broke, since he only got his title by accident, and both started laughing at him. Oof, these guys sounded like the worst. Alan was trying not to lose it. He thought he would rather have these idiots go talk trash behind his back than deal with it himself. But he got it, sort of. Everyone thought the Palacio family only had power because they ran the whole underworld and were filthy rich. But now, Alan had given up all that shady business, just focusing on living comfortably. He made enough money doing other things, and the underworld? Bro, that was someone else's problem now. He wanted zero part in that mess. With Alan out of the game, all the little wannabe gangsters were fighting over scraps, turning the underworld into a mess. So, people started saying Alan only got lucky and wasn't a real mastermind anymore. The two nobles kept taunting him, acting like they wanted to help him out since he was broke. Alan was about to explode, thinking they were way too old for this playground drama. But then, he realized something. These two clowns used to be at the bottom of the food chain when Palacio ruled everything. Now that he was weak, they were taking their chance to talk smack and act like big shots. Alan thought it was like dealing with internet haters. He just wanted to screenshot these guys and save them as PDFs and report them all. They wouldn't shut up either. Yikes, what a pain. Instead of fighting them, our dude just called out to Evan, asking what took him so long. Evan walked in, holding a basket of roasted corn, and said he got it from the kitchen and offered Alan some. Bro, Alan's mood flipped in a second. Roasted corn on a chilly evening? Now that was a real blessing. He and Evan sat there, happily snacking, while the two nobles kept yelling insults in the background, stuff about how our protagonist had lost all his mafia guys, and his carriage looked as busted as he did. Alan thought their insults were starting to sound like a diss track, honestly. He just kept eating his corn, thinking it would be even better with some butter. Priorities, man. Meanwhile, far away in the frozen north, things were getting a lot more deadly. The land was just snow, cold, and total darkness, run by barbarians who lived for fighting. Out there, a huge barbarian named Great Klekon was bleeding out in the snow, trying to get up. Well, he was the barbarian defeated by Deus before. He muttered that the knights from Caliburn had tricked them, pretending to want a fair duel but stabbing them from behind. Not exactly an honorable end. Well, for these barbarians, dying in battle was the best thing ever, but getting outsmarted like this? That was just embarrassing. Klekhan was one of the top 8 barbarian chiefs, but now he was on the ground, totally wrecked. He said he couldn't close his eyes in shame, knowing he'd failed so badly. Suddenly, some freaky stuff started happening. The dying guy heard a voice in his head, a mysterious deep voice, telling him to call out the great name he worshipped. The sky was glowing, and snowflakes were falling, as the voice asked him again and again to call its name. Barely alive, the dying barbarian whispered the name, Ulol Trulus, the great god. His body started glowing with purple and blue light, like magic was waking up inside him. He shouted for Uloltrulus to accept his plea. And then, the god himself started to appear. An enormous, ghostly figure, shining blue and with long hair, looked down at him. One of its eyes lit up red, and it smiled the creepiest little smile ever. The god answered, saying he would grant his wish. Dude, Alan literally jinxed it. This god shouldn't appear now since all 5 great sins are not awakened. But here he is. Our poor Alan is probably going to have a heart attack in the next part. Meanwhile, our boy Alan was stuck in his carriage, bored out of his mind. That bitchy 2 other nobles with annoying faces were still making fun of him. The long-haired jerk kept saying dumb stuff like he felt so sorry for Alan that Alan probably didn't have enough food, and he might even cry for him. Both of those guys just laughed and sneered like they were the kings of comedy or something. But you know what? Our MC just ignored them. He looked super confident, almost like he was chilling at a riverbank, fishing for fun while the 2 haters stood in the background, mad because he wouldn't take the bait. Well, not falling for that kind of trash talk was something top gamers do. And inside his head, Alan just thought that he was about to make a big catch. Dude was cool as ice. Then, night came, and everyone stopped in the forest to rest. At the campfire, Alan and his bro Evan munched on roasted corn and fish, just vibing, while those 2 mocking nobles stood behind them, looking like they just lost a bet. Everyone had to admit it. Alan was the winner here, just by ignoring those losers. But while our boys were relaxing, the 2 bullies went off to plot in the shadows. The mustache guy talked about extra escort troops, and the long-haired one said he had checked with his magical artifact. The only real guard Alan had brought was Evan, who they called the Thug Knight. Even then, the long-haired noble complained that Alan talked like a real noble, which ticked him off. The mustache dude thought some rumors must have been true. Palacio is now just a weak noble house. And they started talking about moving their plan forward to grab more money and power from the criminal underworld. They even dreamed about rolling in jewels and gold, saying things were finally about to go their way. These two seriously thought they could take over and maybe give Alan a gift to teach him how the world works. Yeah, I bet they were going to misunderstand in the next chapter. Well, as the night grew dark, the place suddenly felt creepy. That bitchy noble started screaming in terror. He yelled that there were monsters. There, a bunch of glowing red eyes stared back at them. They freaked out hard, screaming as knights started running around, weapons out, and a mage lit up the woods with a bright spell. And bro, what a nightmare. The light showed a massive group of scary goblins. These things were huge, with crystal on their body and angry, glowing eyes. One knight tried to talk tough, saying it was just goblins. But well, the real problem was that its true goblins are weak if there aren't too many. But if there's a swarm, well, things get bloody fast. You could see it too, this wasn't a little monster group. The fight started, and blood and bodies were everywhere. One knight was totally freaking out, yelling that this was nonsense. He shouted that he'd never seen goblins like these. Some goblins were even bigger and covered in purple crystals. These monsters had magic power too. That meant they were way more dangerous than normal. Suddenly, the goblins started smashing the knights, tossing them like rag dolls. It was brutal, man. But then, a giant rock wall shot up, and a magical shield covered the survivors. A blue-haired mage wondered who had cast such strong spells. Turns out it was our boy Alan. He stepped up, looking serious, his hand glowing with purple power. He called out a spell for enhancement, slammed his fist into the ground, and purple energy burst out, trapping the goblins. He squeezed the energy tighter and tighter, compression, until the goblins were crushed, and made a huge purple orb float over the battlefield. Then raised his hand and shouted vacuum, sucking rocks and pieces into the orb. When he finished the spell, the whole place shook. He finished it off by telling everything to return to the origins. And the orb just exploded, wiping out the goblins in a flash of purple light. The knights and nobles all just stared, totally shocked. Suddenly, like a true protagonist, Alan told the knight not to stand around and to get ready because more monsters were coming. The goblins rushed again, but Alan's magic and the knight's glowing swords kept them at bay. Our MC keeps using magic and cuts through the monsters like a boss. At last, the sun came up on a battlefield full of dead crystal goblins. One of the nobles gasped that it was finally over, and the knights just stood there, panting, staring at Alan. They whispered to each other, wondering who the hell this guy even was. Meanwhile, our boy walked past the bodies. In his head, he admitted he almost died, but at least they won. He checked his new artifact and thought, thanks to it, he could use a bit more magic per day now, maybe 3 or 4 spells, but after a while, he was just an ordinary dude with his magic tank empty. He realized how scary it was to not be able to protect himself, even with Evan nearby. Suddenly, Evan came over, super worried, asking if his boss was hurt. But our protagonist said he was fine even though he looked a little shaken. Alan sighed, saying to himself that he really was okay. Then our boy noticed a huge purple amethyst crystal sticking out of the ground, glowing in a creepy way. He started stressing about why some crazy event called Divine Descent had just happened. Well, Divine Descent was a freaky trait that made monsters go wild and way stronger, and usually happened when an outer god was about to show up. But fuck, outer gods were only supposed to come after the 5 deadly sins awakened and the world's rules broke down. So why was this happening now? He clutched his head, totally confused, wondering what exactly had gone wrong. Later, he looked out at the autumn trees and thought to himself that he needed to collect info super fast when they got to their destination. He worried that, at this rate, he might die soon. No joke. But looking at his scary face, those 2 nobles who mocked him earlier almost shit themselves. Did they really make fun of someone this scary yesterday? See, I told you guys, more understanding is coming. The next morning, everyone finally reached the giant mansion of the ducal house of Rotagray. The place was buzzing with carriages and nobles in fancy clothes. Alan and Evan got out of their carriage. Our MC looked so tired, he could barely stand. He groaned that they were finally there. But inside, he thought it had been nothing but trouble the whole way. The gathering was finally starting, but the poor guy just wanted to go home and pass out. He leaned on Evan, wobbling through the crowd, just wishing for some sleep, while all the other nobles and knights stared, probably still shocked from last night's madness. Man, what a ride. Our hero barely survived, and now the real party was just beginning. At night, the party begins. This place was like a gold museum, dude. Everything was shiny, and all the nobles looked like they just robbed a jewelry store. Our boy Alan stood there, staring at the crowd with his usual blank face, and honestly, he was thinking this was all just for the nobles to show off their money. He even thought they probably wouldn't notice if someone took a little gold. Our boy's got jokes, man, but he still thought it all looked kinda tacky. Nearby, some nobles were gossiping. One with long hair started hyping up the Duke, saying he was so impressive, and everyone laughed like they wanted something. Alan watched this circus for a second, but he wasn't really feeling it. He told himself he should stay away from these people. He really did not want to chat. But then, out of nowhere, someone called out to him. Our MC turned, a little surprised. It was those two nobles, a mustache guy and a long-haired guy, bowing like he was their king. They acted super polite and asked if he had time for them. For a second, Alan even imagined them giving him the craziest gifts, like a mountain of meat and a box overflowing with gold. They were basically saying they wanted to send help to his territory and offer the best meat from their lands. Our boy just looked at them, totally confused, while those two started shaking in their shiny boots. In their eyes, Alan looked terrifying, like demon-level scary. These guys were panicking hard, whispering among themselves that they shouldn't have messed with him. And then, snap! Flashback time. Just yesterday, after a big goblin fight in the forest, the mustache and long-haired nobles just stood there, frozen in fear, after witnessing Alan's insane magic. These two cornered some mage lady, desperate to know if Alan's magic was really as strong as they thought. She basically told them Alan was way more powerful than even a second circle mage, maybe even third circle or higher. These two realized they messed up big time, lucky to be a count my ass, their stupid mouth ruining everything. Now, they saw him as someone who didn't even need bodyguards because he was so dangerous. Alan was a true monster from Palatian, so they needed to beg if they wanted to stay alive. Back in the present, the nobles were begging on the floor, heads down, asking Alan to forgive them for being jerks. Evan even asked if these guys were causing trouble again. He even offered to kick them out, but our boy said it would be more annoying if they made a scene. He was just thinking, man, he didn't even have real power, but if these dudes wanted to be scared, then whatever. The nobles kept shaking and whispering to each other that they were totally screwed. Alan was kind of petty about it, honestly, but who could blame him after the way they acted? But anyway, moving on, Alan sent Evan off to the Information Guild, so he decided to get some noble gossip himself. He grabbed a fancy egg tart and started listening to two guys whispering in the corner. Using a bit of magic, he boosted his hearing. These two were talking about some alliance between Duke Altea and Count Zenonia. Well, our boy didn't really care about that. He thought their alliance wouldn't last. After all, they were two big villain underworlds in the game. He was just happy about how good the egg tart tasted, bro. But then in the middle of his snack, he overheard something wild. The real head of the new noble faction was Count Palatio. That's right, our MC. The fuck. He was so shocked he dropped his egg tart. He couldn't believe it. He barely knew these people. How did this rumor even start? He was annoyed, thinking it was just people making stuff up. He only met Duchess Altea once when she was younger, and the daughter of Zenonia twice. How the fuck did he become their leader? Before he could recover, some new guy walked up, Carmen, with wild purple hair and a red and gold outfit. He introduced himself, all snooty, like he was hot stuff from another country. Carmen said he heard Alan became a count by luck, and wanted to know his secret. He was super happy right now, thinking Alan was just nobody he could mess with. Meanwhile, our boy was dying inside, but kept it together on the outside. He just thought, wow, even twisted donuts could talk these days. Suddenly, a noble tried to stop a fight, asking if Carmine was just mocking a noble of his Asteria kingdom. But Carmine panicked and said it's not what he meant. In his head, he thought Alan would be an easy target to bully because he had no connections. Then, we gotta look at Carmine's tragic backstory. This dude came all the way from his country just to marry the Duke's youngest daughter. He was acting like he was the most handsome man in the whole world, shit, and thought no woman could ever refuse him. But when walking with the Duke's daughter, he acted like a jerk to her and other girls. Talking like one girl needs to lose some weight, and the other has too big of nose. Like he doesn't have a mirror to see his poopy face himself. In the end, the Duke's daughters got annoyed and shut him down hard, and the marriage was cancelled. So, now he was just left with his wounded pride and a big attitude problem. That's when he spotted Alan and thought of bullying him a bit to vent his frustration. But fuck, this became stupidly big. The other big-shot nobles, Duke Rotegri, Marquis Mardanio, and Count Palan, showed up and caught Carmen being disrespectful. They basically grilled him for being rude to Alan. Carmen freaked out and started bowing and begging for forgiveness. The three powerful nobles stood together, and even Alan was surprised that they were backing him up, considering they barely knew him. Well, who doesn't know them? They were basically the central axis of the Asteria kingdom. And now, they bullied Carmine like three big penguins bully the small one. Wait, the scene looked oddly familiar with his own experience. The one when he made a mess in his military camp, and his boss punished him for being stupid. Yeah, this one was bringing back some traumatic memories. In the end, the poor Carmen couldn't hold back and cried while running away from there. After the stupid one was gone, Duke Rotagri made sure Alan was okay. Our boy just said he was okay, but inside, he was super confused about why everyone was acting so weird toward him all day. He could hear the other nobles chat about how they figured out that the rumor about Alan being the head of an alliance must be true, and the gossip was spreading like wildfire, and that was why everyone suddenly cared so much. In the end, Alan thought this was too much, and decided to tell everyone that the gossip was baseless. But next, the three big nobles offered him magic artifacts and gifts, trying to win him over. Well, our boy was super tempted and thought maybe he should explain the truth, but, bro, those gifts were just too good to pass up. Guys, we all know Alan and his shitty personality, so he stayed quiet and took the loot. He couldn't beat the temptation and got 2 magic artifacts and 5 mana potions. Later, at dawn, the scene switched to Duke Rotagri's annex. The Duke and a mysterious figure discussed Alan's acceptance of his gifts. Well, small gifts between nobles were just polite, but when you gave rare stuff like magic artifacts, it was like saying you wanted to join their team. Giving the gift to the head of the group made it official. The Duke was getting accepted to their team. Well, the funny part was that Alan was now basically recognized as the leader of the alliance, even though he didn't ask for it. Then that mysterious figure, Duchess Altea, said she was happy with how everything was working out. The big nobles sat together, all smiling and acting like they were already on the same side. Now, they could walk together officially and share the same purpose. Bro, this alliance was getting bigger and bigger. In the future, maybe Alan could become the king or something. That escalated so quickly, huh?